Welcome, family. Please let me know if you can hear me okay. Y'all let me know if I'm coming in crystal clear. Just hit me out with a thumbs up in the chat. All right, we're going to start things off a little different tonight. So if you guys don't know who's on the screen, this is Mr. Don Curry, aka DC. If you've ever seen Friday, this is the uncle from Friday. But I wanted to start here, and we won't watch the whole thing until later on in the stream. But I wanted to start with some humor before we get into the serious stuff. So, y'all sit back, relax, and enjoy. And I'll be enjoying it with y'all. So.
Can't make enough money and lose your mind. So I'll never forget where I came from. I won't forget. I came up in the church. But every now and then I go visit a white church with some white friends of mine. And really, I got no problem with the content of the material. But they can't never break it down and make it relate to me because my background is so different. Even though they got some things I really like at the white churches. They're going to let out on time. I like that. 11 o'clock. 11:30 at the latest, I'm out of there. I can go to the house and watch the whole ball game. Then it's a calm situation. Ain't nobody gonna be jumping around on my feet, hollering out a bunch of personal confessions, putting my name in the stuff. I didn't want to tell all my damn business. Then they ain't gonna tell, they ain't gonna raise but 1 or 2 offerings. Ain't no billing fund, the billing is already paid for. Just relax. But they can't break it down and make it relate to me, so I have to stick with the old black church where y'all are jumping around acting a damn fool. I know how you feel. Been struggling all week, and now you're among some more struggling folk. You feel like you can let your hair down. But I got some questions and some complaints for y'all. I want to know why you got the whole service all day long. 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon, I'm sitting in here listening to the man say the same thing over and over in different keys. Why you gotta let the choir sing the song so many times? 17 verses and the chorus between every verse. Then the little director gonna make up a verse about his personal problems. You wanna hear that? We got our own personal problems. Why you got so many offerings? Pastors offering, deacon S offering, sick Susan May's offering. We all got sick ass folk. Let everybody take care of their own damn sick folk. And the building fund, oh yeah. You've been collecting for the building fund for 19 years. When you gonna build the building? You're trying to build an Astrodome or something? Got to be $17 million in the building fund by now. Why the announcement so long? Half of that stuff in the paper. Just set up a newsstand outside. That's where I choose to go. I make sure I patronize my own folk. Every time I go back to the hood where I grew up, I go to a little old family-owned grocery store. You got one in every neighborhood. I know it's hard, but you got to be dedicated to patronizing your own struggling folk. You got to apply your own affirmative action. That's what you got to do. I know it's hard. I go to a little grocery store that's been there about 40 years, still ain't got a damn thing on the shelf. Get up to the counter, the price gonna be different, but you got to stick with them. I know it's hard. I don't even know why they call it a convenience store. They ain't got a damn thing you want. They call it the inconvenience store.
Oh man, so
All right, I'm gonna unmute myself today. But welcome. Good evening. Yo, welcome back. Hope you guys had a good week. Hope you guys' Friday is off to a good start. Hope your weekend is off to a good start. hopefully, Dr. Johnson's going to have some time a bit later on in the stream. He's grading papers right now to hop in and give his much more polished perspective on the subject of our dialogue, which is um, basically, I mean, we've talked about it before, but like, what is our responsibility to the community, and what is the community's responsibility to us, right? And I have several thoughts. Earlier this week, uh, me and a friend of mine actually were on two different sides of the spectrum with this Deion Sanders situation. I will say, when I first heard the news, I was torn. Right, part of me, you know, really was inspired by what he represented, um, but a part of me also understood why he did it. So, like I said, we'll talk about it. But I'm happy to see you guys here. Tanisha, I see you. AKO the GOAT, I see you. Lavia, I see you. S Dot, I see you. And also, S Dot brings up a really good point. Last week I pointed out the YouTube tax on Super Chat. So today I actually have my Cash App up. So if you send comments through Cash App to bless the ministry, not only will I thank you, but I'll also read it out. So we don't have to necessarily rely on YouTube. And as we progress, as the website is completed, hopefully we can transition a lot of this to a platform that we fully own and control. But yeah, so before we get to that, I wanted to bring up some stuff, and I'll be opening the phone lines later on. So y'all feel free to take notes if you want to come back to something. But Mr. DC Curry, the reason I wanted to start with this video, he's talking about um, he's making jest of how frustrating it is to patronize your own folk, as he put it. How frustrating it is to be committed to the community, but you must remain committed to the community. Like I say, sometimes it's impossible to love Black people unless you love Black people, and I think this stand up special kind of exemplifies what it is that I'm talking about. Because I think the mistake we make as community first people, as hoteps, um, in an attempt to offset the negative narrative, the prevailing narrative of the community, sometimes we over embellish um, the goodness of the community, and sometimes we downplay some of the nonsense in the community. And I think this Deion Sanders thing is a great example of that. As some of you guys know, there were some issues that he had to deal with leading up to his decision to leave, leading up to his decision to um, go somewhere else, and we'll talk about it. But real quick, quick recap. This I think this week or last week, Brittany Griner has been released from Russia. Apparently, she was traded for the Lord of War. Apparently, the Russian or the guy who she was traded for is was the inspiration for the movie Lord of War. He was an arms dealer. He inspired or instigated conflicts around the world, and he was traded for Brittany Griner. I want to know you guys' thoughts on that. I want to know where you guys fall on that. Um, I don't know enough to have thoughts yet, but just on the face, it doesn't look good, to be honest. Um, Another thing, Derek Jackson is Derek Jacksoning. uh, I, as well as most heterosexual men, are not surprised by what has come to the light about the brother. But when I received the news or when I heard about it, I was I immediately started laughing. I thought it was hilarious. I thought, of course, but he's built a following, and even after the first scandal, he still had 1 point something million followers, and I'm sure he'll figure out a way to spin this. Um, in other news, Megan and Tory Lanez are in court, and it seems to be the case that things didn't transpire the way that we thought they did. AKA, it seems to be the case that Tory didn't actually shoot Megan. I'm interested to see how this plays out, in the media, how this plays out with the Me Too movement, how this plays out with female empowerment, as Megan is a pivotal, uh, part of that movement and that brand. Um, Recently, Skip and Shannon, they got into a shouting match on the show, uh, because apparently Skip was using ad hominem to discredit Shannon about his critiques of Tom Brady. And Shannon didn't like that. And they had a back and forth. And some people are using that as an example for this is why the community is important. This is why you should have your own. So nobody can ever talk to you like you're nobody. We lost a brother this week, Twitch. For those of you guys who don't know, Twitch is or was the DJ / one of the co-hosts of the Ellen DeGeneres show. And he passed away this week. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff happening. If you guys don't know, we're on TikTok. We're back on TikTok. The TikTok handle is WN2 Talk. So the number 2 Talk. And recently I posted a clip of let me see, what interview was it? But it was a young lady. She was talking about divestors, and she started to cry. She was crying because she said it's heartbreaking that women are giving up on black men because she thinks of great black men in her life, like her dad or like her brother. And so in that particular clip, she was in tears and she was sad about the situation, and she was expressing that sadness. I have to tell you, when I was looking through the comments on TikTok, so it's episode 81, but when I was looking through the comments on TikTok, it was discouraging, to say the least. I thought, if anything, the people would be talking shit, or the dudes, and the women would empathize or sympathize with the young lady. But it was the complete opposite. The women were confused as to why she was in tears. One young lady commented on her looks. She called her a whale. Another young lady was it was bad. It's bad. And I think the most heartbreaking part about it is it makes you consider, if you, somebody like me, if I'm approaching this thing properly, right? Like my my goal with these videos, my goal with the dialogue is to facilitate productive conversations between men and women, to not only show that we can have productive conversations, but to also model how to do it. And sometimes, I ain't gonna lie, I'm discouraged to see that that goal might not actually be hitting the way that it's supposed to. Like I said, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. Let me see. Make sure I'm not missing anything. So we got the BGS in the chat. BGS, salute, brother. How you doing? Let's see. Brian Turner, how you doing? He says Jay Hobson, a white coach led who led Alcorn State into the powerhouse it is today, did the exact same thing Coach Sanders did. He's called a hero. Coach Sanders is being vilified. Yes. So, like I said, when I first heard the news, I was torn, right? I was, because I'd heard the stories about his office being broken into. I'd heard the stories about the water heater not working, him having to put his players in hotel rooms, him having to feed his players out of his own pocket, him having to sacrifice his salary, him having to pay for updated facilities, him having to bring in sponsorships on top of attracting attention of NFL recruiters, attracting the attention of top recruits. And to for this sellout narrative to be how he is sent off, for me, is really, 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 really infuriating, right? And part of the, you know, the disagreement that I had earlier this week is I'm looking at this more so from the standpoint of, as a black man, it seems like you cannot do enough to be remembered in a good light for your own people, right? Coach Prime's contract was 4 years. He stayed 3 years. He stayed through a bunch of bullshit for 3 years. And instead of the narrative being thank you for everything you did while you were here, the narrative is you're a sellout, you're money hungry, you're just self interested. And, you know, so last week, last week's stream was the 50K celebration. And one of the things that we talked about, one of the things that came up is, I don't know how to celebrate, right? And we were talking about it and we were talking through it. And I was like, I need to do better. But after that stream, I actually sat back and I wanted to think through what got me here, like what led me to the point where I don't know how to take in or accept my win. And like a lot of I don't know if you'll say just Africans or black men in general, or black men in the South, we were raised by mothers who shouldered us with responsibility that wasn't necessarily our own, right? Like I remember growing up, especially as the oldest sibling, not only was I blamed for things that I did wrong, I was also blamed for things my siblings did wrong. Because if I was a better brother, they would be better siblings, right? So my experience in life is one that I'm always wrong, even when I'm right, even when I'm innocent. Um, and I think as a consequence of that, on top of the whole Dr. Lawyer Engineer thing that, every Nigerian knows about, you're a failure unless you have your master's degree at 24 years old. Like, there is never enough. You are never enough. And in some ways, I think it pushes us to a certain degree of success, a certain degree of greatness. But on the other hand, now that, we're talking about black men's mental health, now that we're talking about self-awareness, you start realizing some of the negative consequences of it, right? And for me, I think that's one of them, right? Earlier this week, I commented in the community tab that I think it's unfortunate that black men aren't allowed to be mediocre. Black men are not celebrated for mediocrity, and I didn't mean mediocrity, uh, you know, in a negative way, like is usually the connotation. I meant mediocrity as like normal, right? Like we talk about now, you got to be 6 foot, six figures, six pack, all these things that are ideals. Whereas on the flip side, the the push for marketing is to celebrate the female delegation regardless of how they show up, right? You're beautiful at any size. It's not that you're too much, it's that he's not enough. It's not that you have a bad attitude, it's that he can't handle you, right? And that's why I think this conversation is so much bigger for me than Deion Sanders. And the question that I have for anybody, and y'all make sure to do the poll that's in the chat. But the question I have for anybody is like, what is enough? Like, what can we do as black men who care, as black men who give a damn? That's enough, right? Because there is going to be another coach at Jackson State. There's going to be another mini Deion Sanders who might be considering coaching. People have talked about Jerry Rice potentially considering coaching or Michael Vick potentially considering it. And the question I don't think anybody's thinking of is like, what are those men thinking as they witness how our community is dragging a man's name through the mud for being nothing but a net positive to the community, right? Like regardless, even if Deion Sanders is the money hungry, self-centered, egotistic person that we're painting him to be, is Jackson State better today than it was pre-Deion Sanders? And is Deion Sanders better today than he was pre-Jackson State? I think those answers are pretty clear. And for me, I think that's what's disappointing. That's what's disappointing. I remember back in college when I was the president of NAACP, the people who made my tenure the most difficult were members of NAACP, and more specifically, the other female leadership of NAACP. And I say, like, it's hard to love black people unless you love black people, because it is frustrating as hell trying to be community centered. Anybody who's ever done work in a community, donated, whatever the case may be, it is frustrating as hell helping or doing stuff for people who look down on you for no reason, for people who you can never do enough for people who, even if you have spent the last 10 years breaking your back in service, the one day that you say, I need a day off, it's, oh, you're weak or you're a sellout. This what have you done for me lately culture must die. And I'm saying this as somebody who's preaching save your community, black man, save your community, black woman. And just observing how this black man who didn't have to go to jail. And that's the part of this narrative that for me pisses me off. Because the idea is that Jackson State made Deion Sanders. No, Deion Sanders was Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders made Jackson State. Let's be clear. Like, I think HBCUs are important. I think HBCUs are vital. But at the end of the day, if we're going to help our people, we have to be honest with our people. That was not the best environment for him. He chose to do that. He had good intentions, and he did everything that he said he was going to do and more, but the narrative still remains that he didn't do enough. It's frustrating, man. It's frustrating. Ryan, I see your comment. Ryan says he did have to go to Jackson State. Nobody would hire him. Um, I would like you to elaborate on that. You know, I'll concede maybe you have more information or information that I don't have. However, I know that his ability to recruit alone would have been invaluable to any school, even D1 schools. I also know even if D1 or D2 schools weren't willing to hire him, I know there are a list of JUCO schools that would have been ecstatic just for the ticket sales alone to have Deion Sanders at the helm. So, like I said, I'm open to pushback, but I am not fully sold that he couldn't have gone anywhere else. Let's see. So, one of the things I wanted to point out, and I've been trying to give it some thought, but a lot of times, especially during this male female dynamic conversation, we talk about the Tupac with a PhD, that archetype being the um, ideal I don't know, man for women or for Black women in more particular. But I think a lot of times we don't talk enough about how dangerous that ideal is from the Black male perspective, right? Like the reckless, the barbarian, the fuck everything. I'm willing to shoot at the police. I'm willing to die about whatever. How dangerous making that the prototype is for Black boys and Black men, but unfortunately, it seems like that's the prototype that our women celebrate, right? Not the thoughtful, not the considerate, not the person really doing the work, but the person who's willing to the person with the martyrdom syndrome. Like a lot of people don't know, Dr. King's last speech, he talked about not wanting to be a martyr. But yet we want to encourage martyrdom from our boys. And I'm all for saving the community. I'm all for, obviously being willing to die about things that you care about. But for that archetype to be encouraged, for that archetype to be like, you're not a man unless you're willing to, I think it's not right. We're joined by the Dr. Tiasan Johnson. Without further ado, I'm gonna bring him up. I know he doesn't have a whole lot of time today, but I appreciate you being here, my brother. Thank you for gracing us with your presence.
No, I appreciate your patience, man. I owe an apology to my good brother because when he asked me about this, I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And then I'm grading like crazy, so that's my bad. I promise.
Listen, life be life, and like I'm talking about here, like I still owe you appreciation. Even the fact that you were able to say yes is enough for me, right? I'm not with this. If you don't fulfill everything the way that I see it, you ain't shit. Like I'm not with that at all. But I mean, what's your take on all this, man? I know you have more of a nuance, you know what I'm saying, in depth take on this.
Nah, I wouldn't say that, man. This is not really my lane, but I was gonna do a show about it early this week and got caught into, this is finals week and all of that.
Yeah.
No, I think we're probably more in line than not. I didn't get to hear your entire monologue, but my viewpoint on Deion, first and foremost, was that I don't think he was appreciated enough, and I thought, if anything, the treatment he got afterwards was so ridiculously blatant. I mean, so horribly, kind of extended to him that anybody coming after him would pause. I mean, I think that was just really bad look in the sense that, if you're going to lionize somebody and you're going to pedestalize them to meet all of your requirements, all of your fantasies and dreams about what you think they're going to do, and they don't meet your standard or decide to go another way in any context, if this is the kind of blowback they're going to get, that's not going to inspire a lot of people to really want to replace him. But beyond that, I just looked at the dynamic and I listened to a couple of people, on YouTube, who, I respect, JT, Pocket Watchers, that, I checked out Pink Book. I listened to a number of people. Shout out to Jay Sabaz. Appreciate that.
Appreciate you, brother.
To see the brother go, what he had to extend out of his own pocket, to try and build the program, see him cutting his own grass, where it's just, to have a lucrative TV deal turned down when he's trying to build up what's going on. And then, of course, the whole debate about, if there are resources that the football team secures, how much of that comes back to kind of build the program. And I'm saying this as an academic. I've seen students who could barely read be brought into college classes and just dumped in there. And I'm in Africana studies, so they'll throw kids in there, students in there who, really are years behind just to have an athlete, at the campus. I've been to a number of campuses from undergrad to, to now, and I've seen this happen over and over again. I used to tutor the football team when I was in grad school at Temple University, football and basketball. And, I've seen a lot of young men that were filtered through there simply because they could handle the ball, even though they weren't prepared and they weren't being given the support they needed to function academically. So I've seen a lot of that. I don't put athletic programs on a pedestal just because. I do recognize for a lot of Black men, that's the only opportunity they really have. But in Deion's, kind of sense, I'd never really seen a coach kind of, open up a lane like that.
Right.
And, just the things he went through. The things he pointed out while he was still there about, the contract, about how he was treated, about, whether or not they had followed through on the things that were agreed upon. I'm not saying that those things would have kept him there, but I think it would have went a long way, in terms of establishing his faith in the arrangement they had. But for him to, to be pointing these out publicly, these issues, that was a bad look, So, all in all, when I reflect on Deion as an archetype for Black men and the community as a whole, yeah, I definitely see an alignment there, where Black men are expected to be Superman, to make things, all fit and lift everything out of, where it is. And what you find, this is why I came up with the term conquistador. What you find is when Black men are actually doing that, they're not credited for doing it. They're not credited for doing it. They're dismissed. In fact, you'll turn around and see people, they'll pat themselves on the back for their sacrifice and completely ignore the men who've done this. And I've seen this at graduation ceremonies. I've seen it with celebrities who won't acknowledge. Particularly, some of these feminist celebrities that'll talk about men in such a negative way. I think we saw that with the comedian, what's her name? Escapes me a couple of days ago. She used to argue with Patrice O'Neal back in the day. Shamika or something like
Shamor?
No, it was the other. I saw her yesterday. Her name escapes me. Some of the people in the chat would probably know, but but just the kind of, the misandric, kind of take on Black men. And then you delve into these people's lives and they've had boyfriends, husbands, fathers who've been there from day one. And you're like, but the disrespect toward men is so rampant and so well accepted that, I think it's really pushing for what we're having right now. We're having a moment that I've never seen in my lifetime, where Black men are actually communicating with each other. They're comparing notes and they're saying, you know what, this won't stand. Now, there are a number of responses to this. You have some Black men that are going to delve in harder and try and build the Black community in one way, shape, or form. You have other Black men that are just abstaining in silence. You have others that are passport bros that are talking about leaving the country. I think there's a lot of different responses. And I think Black men get kind of put in this trick bag where we're told that, we only have one response. There's actually quite a few different responses that Black men have toward this. But overall, the fact that Black men are communicating and responding is something I never thought I'd see as a unit in that sense. Because at the end of the day, what we're looking at is really, just kind of, this kind of moment where we're looking back and saying, okay, we're looking at our own individual lives. We're looking at ourselves as a collective. We're looking at the treatment of Black men, even retroactively. And what we're seeing is that misandry is well accepted. Most people don't even know what the term means. We know what misogyny means. We don't know what misandry means. And so, I think there are a lot of Black men that have been looking for a language to explain these experiences. And as they start to absorb the language that's really being developed, we're starting to see that brothers have been frustrated for quite a while. You know what I mean? And so when you have these moments like with Deion, this is one of the terms I talked about last year. I called it the black masculinist turn. You know, and I think the clearest example of that was Ice Cube on the Cocktails with Queens interview.
Right. Where,
you know, he was trying to build this program for the black community, and you have these ladies that say to him, well, what about black women? And he said, well, you know, the program's for the black community that includes black women. And they said, well, there needs to be something specifically for us. But he didn't put anything in there along the lines of gender at all, not for black males, not for anything. LGBT, he didn't deal with any sexuality or gender. He was talking about the black community as a unit. So when those ladies, you know, kind of came at him like that, I called it a black masculinist turn moment, because so many brothers saw that and had a response like, wow, it doesn't matter what
you do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I call a black masculinist turn moment. And I think that's what we saw with Deion. The way, and not necessarily in that he left, you know, because I think a lot of us didn't really know what was going on with him until he left, and then you started to see the kind of public, you know, reintroduction to some of the interviews he'd done where he pointed out his problems with the university, with Jackson State, so on and so forth. But the vitriol at him leaving, you know, was what I think a lot of brothers responded to. And there's a number of others I can point out that, you know, are big or small. We could talk about Stacey Abrams and her, you know, black male agenda, that really black men's agenda that didn't have anything substantive for black men. I think for some men that was a black masculinist turn. We can talk about the death of Kevin Samuels. Right? The people that the people that literally threw parties because he died. You know what I mean? Now keep in mind, we just had a prominent feminist pass away, prominent black feminist, right? Just pass away within the last week. Was it Dorothy Pittman Hughes? I forget. She was one of the active black feminists with Miss Magazine and so on and so forth. You didn't see any black men throwing parties at her death. You didn't even see black men throwing parties at the death of Bell Hooks.
Yeah.
At Dorothy Pittman. Nobody, you know, and this is one of the things I said when Kevin died. I said, you know, we've had 40, 50 years of this kind of misandrous critique against black men, and you've still not seen black men respond with the level of vitriol that they receive. You know what I mean? Kevin been on YouTube for a couple of years. We could talk about decades of Oprah and a number of others. I mean, I had to sit in graduate school classes and read these misandries. You didn't have to read, you didn't have to listen to Kevin Samuels as a grad school assignment unless it was in a feminist class that was critiquing him. Right? You still had people that had no problem dancing on his grave. And Dorothy, you know, like I said just a second ago, 84-year-old black feminist Dorothy Pittman passes away. What black men have you seen talking about, you know, dancing on her grave? What?
Yeah.
None. Right. Yeah. So this kind of one way, and Kevin called it himself. He used to call it this kind of one way, low burning or low boiling contempt for black men. This is what generates these black masculinist turn moments where these things happen, and brothers kind of as a collective sit back and go, wow, really? It's like that? Okay. That's how we're going to be regarded.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is about an hour ago, and I won't say the brother's name, but the professor who reached out to me a while back and had me come speak to his class of women, he hit me up and he was telling me that the school is trying to push him out, and was actually using the fact that he incorporated my footage into his class as a reason to. Right, they were saying he wasn't empowering the students, and they created other reasons to kind of make it make sense. But I was like, man, and then his response to me was like, "Yo, I'm done."
Yeah,
and that's what broke my heart, because he was trying to show them the error in their ways, but
well, we've had, like I said, we've had a very one-sided gender discussion in many of these classes, and the concept of the academy is that it would be you know, objective, that you could actually explore ideas simply on the basis. You know, you could examine, you know, ideas simply on the merit of what those ideas bring, but we ignore that there's a very strong political edge to this in terms of what we talk about and what we don't. And so in the black, you know, in the black section of the academy, it's very much geared around, at least in the current era, these kind of black feminist kind of tones. And so if you push back against it, even with a sincere, inquisitive, academic curiosity, the blowback is huge. I had a brother, he interviewed on my show a couple of years ago. This was the only black male scholar I found doing research on black boys and the sex trafficking of black boys. The only brother I found doing it, with a doctorate, professor doing this research. And he came on my show and did an interview, and it was profound. He had evidence, he had statistics, he had data. Profound. This brother reached out to me about 3-4 months ago, and he said, "Can you take the video down?" And I said, "Why? What's going on?" He said, "Well, the feminists are attacking me. My job is in question. I'm having difficulty finding another one because they're all coming at me. And they're coming at me because of my research. My research just pointing out." He didn't say anything about girls. He didn't say anything about women. And that was the problem. Because he didn't foreground them, and he was actually studying black boys who were forced into sex trafficking. That was the offense. So his whole career was in question. And so the best I could do, I said, "Well, because this is the only interview of this kind, can I keep it up there and just take your name out of the title?" He said, "That's fine. That's fine." Because that means that they just can't easily find him with a Google search.
Right.
That's where we are right now, where even when brothers who are in position and are doing the work, they get punished for doing it. Simply because. So this question you're raising is powerful.
I think an interesting question I want your take on. So the last time I was on your show, there was a lot of blowback, right? Because of my stance with the whole Save Yourself movement. Could you help me kind of understand maybe something I missed, or the perspective that I may have not spoken to properly that caused that blowback?
Wait, in terms of what? Wait, break that down.
When I was talking about the Save Yourself movement, and I think I characterized it as men running away. I think that's probably what a lot of the pushback started from. Yeah.
Well, I think overall, you have brothers that are very frustrated with hearing the same kinds of things, and I can say as a Gen Xer, I remember when the talking points that we still hear today really became prominent in the 1980s. And and I think and it went along with some of the things you were even talking about a few moments ago in terms of being 6 feet tall. You got to have a six-pack. You got to have a certain penis length. You got to have 6 figures. I remember when those kinds of things started. Right? Yeah. They weren't in place in forever. I mean, my grandmother. I wouldn't be here if my grandmother's generation started pushing that line. But we really started to see it in the 1980s. And so with that, you also got these stock talking points, about how to interpret black male behavior. So I think when you kind of push that line that brothers were running away, it struck people as a very consistent, kind of repetitive thing that we tend to hear from women. But here's the crux of it. Whether you agree with what these brothers are doing or not, how many people actually sit down and listen to black men when they're pointing out things that go counter to what people are comfortable with hearing, right? And what we call the Manosphere in many ways is a space where brothers, for the first time that I'm aware of, are able to come together and share ideas, even if those ideas are unappealing to the mainstream. Right. But here's the thing, women have been allowed to do this in the academy, in the corporate boardroom, on screen over films and television shows and on plays and in writings and whatnot. They've been able to reflect on the most negative aspects of their experiences with us in every context imaginable. Black men haven't had that stage except maybe in hip hop, right? That was it. You had this space where you had a couple, a number of young brothers who were talking about this, but that was it. They had all these different environments. So now with social media, you really start to see black men coming together. Now, here's the thing. Many are unlettered, right? This is not being done in a classroom where there's a certain kind of decorum that we all agree to have. And we're going to, this is happening with brothers that are homeless. You got brothers sleeping on people's couches. You got people who run banks. You got CEOs of organizations. And trust me when I tell you, these men have communicated to me, what status they have under the table. The people you see in the chat with all of these, various names that you can't make out, because nobody's, they're not using their government names. You got brothers in here that are 6 and 7 figure earners. Got cats in here that run banks, you can run their organizations, run corporations, trucking companies. You'd be surprised the expanse. So here, this is a space where you see Black men across class, across region. We got brothers all the way from South America to Australia to South Africa to Asia to Europe, all over the United States, all in communication. So it's across geographical lines, it's across class, it's across occupation, it's across color, it's across income. I mean, every metric you can think of, this space houses men coming together across all of that, and including gay men. There's gay men in this space. There's bisexual men in this space, and they're dialoguing. I've had communications with them. These brothers are coming together and discussing things that we were not meant to discuss. And we're not allowing people to determine the outcome of those discussions. This is one of the reasons I've had people upset with me. Well, why don't you tell them to do this? No, my job in this space is I'm trying to analyze and understand where we are, and I'm providing terminology to explain our frustrations. Where brothers go with that is up to them. I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'm going to give them the tools to articulate themselves, and we decide where we're going to go from there. That's not happened before. You know what I mean? That's not happened before. And so as it's happening, I'm learning along with everybody else about what we're going through, and because there are brothers who have very different experiences from mine and anything else I've studied.
Right.
So it's an opportunity for me to take in and listen. I mean, if I study Black men, why would I avoid the most significant social movement of Black dialogue amongst men that I've ever seen? Whether it's tasteful, whether I like it or don't like it, there are things I agree with, things I don't, but the fact that it's happening, it's what's important. So I'm here, I'm taking it in, I'm listening as much as I'm sharing, and I'm trying to generate a dialogue that's strictly about Black men articulating their conditions, their situations. And I'm hoping from that we can actually, figure out what next steps we want to take. But this has not happened before. This is 30, 40 years later after Black women have had the same opportunity, but they did so with corporate sponsorship, philanthropic sponsorship, federal government sponsorship. We've had none of that. Every brother you know on YouTube that has a channel, I don't care if it's 100 people or 1 million, how many of them do you know are corporate sanctioned?
Right. Right.
I mean, who pays for your channel? When you built this channel up and started interviewing people, who funded you?
Just me.
You know what I'm saying?
Just me. Yeah.
I can tell you, as I started in this very room, in this very office in my house a few years ago, my YouTube supporters are the one that paid for every single piece of equipment that I have in here that has me on camera. I think I paid for the first camera and the first mic, both of which altogether was probably about $80 at best. The rest of it, the supporters, so we don't come from a situation where we're financed in that kind of way. This is grassroots. And again, it's going to be ugly at times. It's going to be gross at times. It might offend people's sensibilities, even each other's.
Right.
But it's unprecedented. So, as far as that's concerned, I think the blowback we were talking about that you received and others have received is really coming along that lines of, look, I don't want to hear what, we've heard from feminists about what they like and they don't like. I don't want to hear what type of emotional labor that others expect Black men to perform for them. I want to actually explore what my interests are. I can't tell you how many brothers I've met that could not articulate even to a woman in their relationships what they need until they were 50 years old. I got 16-year-old students, I've taught elementary all the way through grad school, but I'm saying the average 16-year-old girl can tell people what she wants in a relationship. I'm meeting men that cannot articulate their needs until they're over 50. What is that? Why is that? What's going on?
We don't think we're allowed to have any.
We're told what we're supposed to do and what we're supposed to want, what we're supposed to like, what we're supposed to believe. I mean, that whole kind of, even if you just took the conversation about what Black men want aesthetically, how frustrated were people about Black men saying,
"Oh man,
for a woman look this way or that way?" Yeah. And we were called all kinds of misogynists. But how long have you been hearing this 6 feet tall thing? We just took height, right? We're going to talk. If we go to 6'2", we talk about what, less than 3-4% of the human population, but they can talk about what they want.
Right.
But Black men still can. If you say what you like, you're already offending somebody. We got whole movements around women being able to be in whatever shape they want. I ain't seen one magazine cover yet of some overweight brothers being framed as attractive for women unless it was a joke. So this kind of one-sided dynamic does not work with men, and men are starting to push back, and people are not used to men, let alone black men, pushing back. They're not used to it.
And that's kind of been part of what I've been discussing even during my interviews, is the fact that even the men who check off these boxes, these arbitrary boxes women and culture have created for black men, even those men are dismissed when they have critiques.
Yes, sir.
Right. So for me, it seems to be the case that there is a the contempt is there, but on top of that, there's an entitlement. So like you're a 6-figure, 6-foot black man, you owe me. Right. So as much as I'm encouraging us to be community centered, I do not think that, it should just be a blind, you owe me perspective on it, because then you get situations like Deion Sanders where you can never do enough because you should just die here. And that's until you die, you haven't done enough.
Yeah. In any functional community, there are pros and cons. There's quid pro quo. There's benefits and drawbacks to any relationship, any dynamic, any social dynamic. And I think it got to a point where by the time we saw the rise of feminism and black feminism in particular, women began to reframe the benefits that they wanted to have in the social dynamic. So, even now in a marriage or in a relationship, she can stay at home. She can work full time. She can work part time. She can own her own business. She can not work at all. She could have a kid. She could have multiple kids. She could have no kids. She could adopt a kid. She could abort a kid. There are all these options for her. For men, there's one role that's pretty much stuck in amber since the 1950s. Now, you can be a stay-at-home dad, but you tell me how many men garner respect when they do that? Right. And I can't tell you how many of them call me, reach out to me, text me to tell me stories over and over again about how their marriages became sexless. How the lack of respect just became all of these things when they tried to explore the options that they were told men kind of have, but we realize we really don't. But even when, going back to what you just said a moment ago, even when we protect and provide, we're still told as a collective we don't protect. We're still told we don't provide. Even the people you are putting food in their mouths will turn around in a social academic context and talk about what black men as a group are not doing. And you're like, I just bought you clothes.
Right.
I just fed you. These kind of dynamics become highly problematic. And I think it's finally reaching a fever pitch where, brothers are willing to do something that they really not as a collective have we ever reflected upon. And that is to look elsewhere in a variety of ways, even to the point of being monks. I have never met 14-year-old monks before until now.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was 14, we were chasing girls left and right. I'm meeting young men that are done and they ain't even started yet.
Right.
They're not chasing anything. They're not. I mean, I'm telling you, I've sat with these young men and had conversations. I'm like, how are they done before they started? But they've watched, when you get down to it, they've watched their parents. They've watched their elder siblings. They've observed the behavior even of the women and girls that they go to school with, let alone in their homes and neighborhoods. These young men are becoming very perceptive, but again, they're also getting the vocabulary and they're hearing the stories of older men that are very consistent with the others that they know in their families and otherwise. This is all starting to gel in a very dangerous way. So coming back to this whole conversation about the black community and black men's role in it, black men are saying, okay, if you want us to do all this sacrifice, what do I get for it? Because you get to play whatever role you feel like playing. You get to do that, and you get to have government support to do that. Okay, fine. What do I get? And this is where the whole conversation about the table came in, and that pissed off so many people. But the reason it pissed off people is because we've never pushed back and asked the question before. We were taught to sacrifice from birth to death, and then we were told that that's what it meant to be a good man. So to this day, many of us have grandfathers that put Big Mama in a house. Don't nobody even remember Grandpa's name. His legal birth name. Don't nobody remember. He's a picture on the wall. It's now Big Mama's house. Don't nobody think about the sacrifice that was made for the family, right? And so if we're looking at that and saying, well, shit, if he can't be recognized, what chance do I have? These are the questions that men are starting to ask. What are the answers? We're not hearing any. So others are withdrawing in certain respects. And again, there's a lot of different ways to withdraw. You know,
Right.
I've seen brothers that are hardcore nationalists that want to build the community, but they're not getting married and they're not having girlfriends. And I've
Mm.
talked about it for the longest. Some of those brothers have gone international. They just decided to, focus their international view or gaze on countries of African descent, right? So they're going to
Right.
the African continent, they're going to the Caribbean. They may even be dealing with Afro Latinas. They're still trying to stay within this Pan-African dynamic. But when you really listen to them and do what I call it, when you get a beer in them and sit down and start talking,
Yeah, I remember you talking about that. Yeah.
they're as red pill as anybody you've seen in the Manosphere, and they don't even know those terms. A lot of these brothers in there, I've seen brothers in their 60s who've been nationalists for decades. They don't even know what the Manosphere is. And when you
Right.
listen to them, and that's not because men are hateful or any of this, it's because we've had the same experiences.
Right.
See, the Manosphere is just the tip of the spear. It's explaining something that's been going on for decades. We just never
Right.
had a place to explain it. But there have been brothers who have been grappling with these issues. Man, my grandfather, I used to be able to sit down. My grandfather wrote a book of poems and short stories. Do you know I did not understand how red pill it was until about 5 years ago?
Wow.
My grandfather was talking about this stuff in the early 70s. I just didn't have a framework for understanding it. But these issues are very old. They're not new. They're
Right.
really not new.
And it seems to be the case that like that contempt is like it's magnified with our women
Mm,
because and I had a brother he came on the show he's come on the show a couple of times. He was on the show last week, but he was telling me about how based on what he does for a living, he's the type of brother when he starts speaking, white folks shut up.
okay.
Like he's that guy, right?
Mhm,
Whereas when he comes home, when he's talking to his girl, when he's talking to women in his life, it's he don't know what he's talking about.
mhm,
And that's what infuriates me because it's like what are these young men supposed to strive for? Because even when they reach there, they still get that same contempt. And
yeah.
I think that's why you see the proliferation of the Pookies and Ray Rays. Because I think some of those guys just said, it's no point. I'm gonna just be lazy, play 2K, go monk, go outside whatever it is that
Mhm,
I want to do. Because even when I do what I'm supposed to do, I can never do enough.
yeah. Yeah. Let me quickly shout out Jake Smooth. I appreciate that. He reminded me I do need to congratulate you on the
Oh,
50,000.
thank you, brother. Thank you,
Congrats
thank
on
you,
that.
thank you,
This is
thank you,
just
thank
the
you.
beginning. You still gonna blow up, man.
I appreciate it, man. I
So,
appreciate it. Thank you.
but no, you're dead on, man. I think this is a lot of what's happening, and I think Dion has just become yet another signpost in many ways for the expectations of black men. I mean, even when I listen to Dr. Umar on the Breakfast Club talk about all the assumptions he made about what Dion was going to do, right?
Right,
He was going to build up not just Jackson State, but all the HBCUs. It was going to help
right.
inspire this whole network.
It's
And I
gonna
was
be
like,
Jesus. Yeah.
yeah. I said, when did Dion ever say he was going to do all of that?
Hmm.
He never did, but somehow he earned your ire because you assumed he was going to become this, major figure that was going to do all of this work. I actually wrote my dissertation on something very similar to this. I called it icon construction. And then,
Mm,
this was before I even started to deal with black men as my major, research focal point. But I was talking about this way that people put expectations and hopes and so on and so forth on key individuals and hope that these individuals are going to somehow transform their environment just by themselves. Um, and I remember one of the professors I tried to get on my committee. I eventually got him on. He didn't understand what I was interested in doing. And I remember him saying, well, he had just watched the Will Smith Muhammad Ali movie. And I said, okay, I'll use that as an example. I said, do you remember when he was in Africa and he was jogging and all the kids were running with him? And then he ran up on this graffiti where they were painting pictures of him punching down tanks and helicopters. He said, yeah, I remember that. I said, that's what I mean by icon construction. All this faith
mm.
placed in one individual to make this sacrificial, kind of gesture that will somehow transform everything. And yet at the same time, you even have those who oppose this person who make the same kind of thing. Now, what do I mean? We've seen corporations, we've seen groups and organizations that hated Martin Luther King when he was alive that will now celebrate King Day.
Right.
King, at one point, Martin Luther King was the most hated man in America,
That's a fact.
and now he's treated like he's Jesus. Right. This is the reality of it. We saw similar things with Kevin. We saw similar things, and this was happening to Deion just in the last few months. The same kind of thing, and the frustration and ire that he's getting is because of how much he failed others' expectations, despite that he never promised to do those things. He did what he could from the context he did it. But when you look at it, he's making $300,000. He's donating what, almost half of that back.
He was donating half, yeah.
And people are saying he's still not doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, how many of y'all are going to take half of your pay, put it back into wherever you're working, and accept that to be enough? I mean, a lot of questions. There's a lot of different ways we can come through this, but at the end of the day, my focus is on how many expectations were placed upon him. How was he treated when he, quote unquote, failed those expectations? And what does that mean for Black men as a collective? How are we seen? What's expected of us?
Right.
We have the lowest life expectancy, and yet everybody expects us to
keep to kill ourselves.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely, man. This shit stays on my mind because I have a pension, which means if I get married right now, my wife is going to get a check even after I die. You think I'm not pondering this? I think about
it. And in your last stream, you talked about the Paul Bunyan syndrome, right? Like, John Henry. I'm sorry, I said Paul Bunyan. The John Henry syndrome. Do you think this ties in at all?
Oh yeah, man. I think it definitely does. I think it's become an expectation of us. And I think for many Black men that really want to either support their community or even just their immediate family, we go into overdrive when things get difficult. Many of us don't talk about our pains, our ills. We go into work mode. But that's something we've seen other men do. That's the rhetoric we've come up around when things get hard. You get harder. That's the kind of dynamic many of us have. But there's a point where we have to actually start looking at. Shout out to BGS. We actually have to start looking at what impact it's having on us. Whether you're talking about DJ Twitch, whether you're talking about some of these brothers. Oh my God, there's been so many Black men that have just been dying this last couple of years. It's ridiculous. Right. But a lot of it, stress is a huge factor that we don't talk about enough. There's one good brother who I've had on my show. He posted something on my Facebook page about a week ago. He said he had two very close friends in their early 40s in excellent shape who eat well. I mean, who exercise regularly. Both of them dropped dead in the last few months. At the end of the day, we have to actually start looking at what it is that we need to process to kind of start handling these things different. Because I don't care what your physical ailment is, stress will make it worse.
Right.
And this is one of the things we grapple with. But it's a reality we all kind of know about, but we accept it. Our communities accept it. And if anything, they weigh on you to work harder, like a work mule. At the end of the day, I'm trying to get brothers to actually stop and reflect. And I don't care what the issues are. I don't judge them. I don't care if it's anything from, the stress of working at John Henryism for employing that John Henry kind of attitude. I don't care if it's colorism. I don't care what the issue is. If it's causing stress, we need to identify it. We need to examine it, and we need to actually set up a strategy of how we as a group plan to deal with it. And one of the things I talked about when I talked about DJ Twitch was how we need to actually support each other. Right. Because here's the thing, there are only so many things I'm going to talk to my woman about. Right. And part of that, if you've ever had a woman take your vulnerabilities and weaponize it against you, let that happen one good time. It ain't happening after that. We know we can talk to our boys. We know, some of us know you can, if you find the right therapist, you can do that. But as a collective, we have not established a support mechanism for one another. This is something that I will credit Black women for doing. They'll call each other.
Facts.
They'll work through it. This is why women across race, but even in the Black community, they attempt suicide in much higher numbers than men. Men commit suicide. We complete it in much higher numbers than women. Right? At the end of the day, they'll attempt it, but they'll reach out. They'll talk to each other. They'll support each other. The girls will get together, grab some bottles of champagne. I mean, we done all seen the war council meetings happen. I grew up hearing them in my living room with my mother and her friends. Those were all emotional and psychological support sessions for navigating the stress she was dealing with. The way I saw men handle that stress, we went to work.
Yeah.
That was how we dealt with it. We went to work.
Yeah.
And there's a point where that becomes detrimental to our own well-being. And I'm going through it now. I'm not talking about this like I'm above and over it.
Same.
Not at all. You know,
Yeah.
this is the work we have to start doing, and we have the opportunity to do it because I've never seen a platform where men could dialogue like this. So we need to take advantage of it. How can I be a resource to you? How can you be a resource to someone, especially during this season? You know how many people commit suicide during the holiday season?
Right.
Feelings of isolation start to really take over. Look, this is the time where you need to call one of your boy you ain't heard from in a while. What's going on with you? You good?
Mm.
And that's and really, 50% of my phone calls is just that. Are you good? What's good with you? What's going on?
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised sometimes what somebody will tell you. And I've had brothers tell me this is the first time my phone rang in 2 weeks outside of bill collectors.
Mm.
You're asking me how I am. I've heard brothers break into what I would call the approximation of our tears. We don't always cry out.
Right. We don't even know how to.
We don't know how to,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, but I've the closest approximation to that, that a brother will give. I've heard that just because I asked him how he's doing.
Mm.
I don't want nothing. I'm not asking you to do nothing. I'm just asking you how you are. And brothers are shocked because nobody does. He could be in a house full of his own family and nobody will ask him how he's doing. And we've grown accustomed to it to where it's off-putting for us to be asked.
Mm.
But we need to be able to provide that resource to one another, if nobody else, because I don't think anybody else understands what brothers go through except other brothers.
Right.
That's just me.
Absolutely. How do you feel like, because, in my opinion, we can only talk about women to a certain point, right? Like as we're establishing this network, whether it's the Passport Bros, whether it's the Save Yourself Bros, how do you think we can better, I guess, facilitate this dialogue amongst ourselves to, get to healing, to get to, our goals in life, independent of what the female delegation is doing to make things difficult for us?
Yeah. Well, I deal with it. I try to position it in two ways just to simplify it. There's the internal and there's the external.
Yeah.
The external is one of the reasons we created the Black Male Political Agenda, where we're collecting proposals from Black men about what kinds of political changes we need to change the nature of our immediate, physical and social environment, right? What are the policies we need? And the majority of those coming in actually are about family court reform. And if you really look through it and you notice that the biggest category there is family court reform, that kind of tells you the issue with women is not just because we woke up one day and decided they were evil. That's not what this is. We talk about this because socially, politically, historically, I believe women have really, in the Black community, women's interests, primarily through feminism, has been weaponized against the community in a very particular way. So when you look through this list of the political agenda, you see ideas proposed by Black men to alleviate the stress, the tension, and sometimes the outright injustice toward Black men that are initiated through families using a court that operates as a proxy for her will against you. So that's a huge factor, and that's about changing the outside environment. The reason I talked about DJ Twitch, the reason on my show we talk about suicide, we talk about stress and John Henryism, we talk about the social roles and expectations that we've had placed on us. That's the internal work. That's the work we have to do of really starting to question the things we're obligated to do, the things that have been expected of us since birth, and actually giving ourselves license to question them. And I don't care if other people like it or not. If I want to say, you know what, I don't know if I want to marry and have 3 kids out the gate. I want to reflect upon, why am I doing this? I don't know if I don't care what the reflection is. I reserve the right for Black men to reflect and make their decisions based on a clear willingness rather than a social obligation, right? That's my goal. I want us to be able to analyze why we do what we do and make clear decisions on why we do it, whether it's to marry and have kids or to stay a monk or to travel abroad. I don't even care what the outcome is, as long as the man in question has reflected upon it, has identified what his solution is, what it is he wants in his life, and can articulate why. That's what I want. I want men to be able to stand on their own too and choose the life they want to live and question the social obligation placed upon them with no reflection, with no sense of who he is, no appreciation for his humanity. I mean, we're mostly raised by a generation of women that are telling us this is what you need to do for us, and we're not even going to deal with why. Well, my entire life, what I heard was what I needed to do when I met the right woman. You know, I never heard anyone tell me what she needed to do for me. I love my mother. I love her. I'm not critiquing her with any malice or disrespect in my heart. But when I got married, my mother's way of helping my marriage is she would call my wife to see how she was doing. You make that make sense to me. You ain't called your son, who's never been married before, who's never seen a functional marriage before. You're not even going to call me and say, how are things going? You're going to call my wife.
Right.
Like, this is the kind of dynamic I'm talking about, where, and part of why I married was because this is what it meant to be a good man. Marry a woman, take care of her, pay her bills, take her out of all the stress that she grapples with, engulf her in protection. And I mean that protection psychologically, emotionally, physically, financially, in every way possible. But I never knew how to even articulate what I needed in a relationship, what kind of support I needed, what kind of reciprocity I needed from her. I never knew how to do that. That was my John Henryism. I took the full load. I expected nothing. I articulated nothing. And if I started to break down, that was my fault.
Right.
These are the kind of things. But again, that was what I learned because I was never taught. You as a man can ask for this, can say that, or matter of fact, can set those boundaries at the dating stage. This is what I'm looking for. I didn't know how to do that. And to this day, when I ask my students if they have a list of requirements in the person they want to be with, only my women can raise their hands and give you a list off the top of their head. And none of them have less than 10 points. They can just list it off. When I ask my men, I can't even get one of them to put their hand in the air. We don't have lists. We don't. I mean, we got to be attracted to her.
Yeah.
But beyond attraction, I can tell you, I've met so few men that can articulate what exactly they're looking for in a woman, what she has to have, and what they won't tolerate. And the first time I broke up with a woman because of something I wouldn't tolerate in her behavior, she raised holy hell because nobody had ever done that to her before.
Right.
And I didn't do it to hurt her or to make us a point for everybody around us. I did it because for the first time I established, no, I'm going to have boundaries. Right. She lost her mind because she had not dealt with any man that had boundaries. This is what I mean when I say this is the work we have to do. It's internal, external. And, at the end of the day, I just say, as far as community is concerned, we're going to have to redefine that. I mean, in many ways, community is no longer going to be DNA based. It's going to have to come down to who's willing to support you, willing to stick through it with you, who's willing to be there from beginning to end. Not the one that comes when you won the big game and she wants to stand next to you and take pictures. Where's the one who's going to come to practice and bring you your bottle of water? Bring your shoes. When you practice it, you ain't nowhere near close to the big game. That's the question. Who's going to be in your corner? And I think that's going to be the standard by which any sense of community is going to be redefined as far as Black men are concerned.
So one of the things I brought up last week, we talk about how on dating sites and things like that, Asian women tend to be the most sought after across racial demographics. And also Asian women are the most likely to marry multiracially. And the point that I brought up was when you compare the Asian woman to the Black woman, for instance, and all the, I guess, advantages that you would assume that the women who are more sought after would have, the Asian woman does not have. They don't have the breasts like Black women or the body like Black women. So the question then becomes, why is it that this type of woman is being the most sought after, even though on paper it seems like you're the better catch? And I brought up the point that it's because Asian women are playing chess while our women are indexing on their sexuality, on their bodies, on their sexiness. So when we're seeing, for instance, the passport bros, they're going to this country. It's not these countries. It's not necessarily that um, these women are just like outright better, but they're better where it counts, right?
Mm.
So my question to you is, why do you think at the core our women do not feel like we're worth competing for?
Well, I think one, they're not taught to compete. I think this comes down to what they're taught about black men. They're taught that black men are just there, and whenever you're ready. And Kevin used to joke about this every once in a while. You go pick a black man off the high value black man tree when you are ready, and often that means when she's in her 30s, her career is together. She may or may not have a few kids from some failed projects in the past, but when she's finally ready, she'll pick the man off the tree and get going. I think that's how we've been, framed. We're a resource to be, taken when she's ready, when she feels like it, not necessarily an entity that has to be dealt with on a humane level. I think that's part of the problem. How young women are taught to think of men, and then the other thing I would say about that is their view. Many a young woman, especially, what they've learned from their elder women advisors about men is that all men need is a wet hole. That's it.
Yeah.
As long as he has a wet hole, he'll comply. He'll do what you want. He'll do what That's all we need. And if that's the understanding, especially when you're talking about girls that weren't raised around men, if that's how they're taught to think about men, then is it really a surprise when the only way she deals with you is on sexual terms? And the only thing she'll talk about outside of sex are the things she wants you to do
from you, right?
Yeah. But how many women can actually walk up to you and say, I can offer you X, Y, and Z, and it actually be things that you value. Right? So we learn how to do that because we learned very early that if you want to get a woman, you have to go get her. You have to seduce her. You got to game her. You got to do all these kind of things. In order to do that, you got to learn what women want. So we learn to do that, whether it's superficial or deep seated. Like we know you got to look good. You got to have the car. You got to have this or that. Men didn't determine that. We looked at what women paid attention to. And even on an emotional level, you got to be emotionally present. You have to have emotional intelligence. You have to listen to her. Yeah, we had love songs telling us this for generations. Right? We learned how to seduce based on what women wanted. Women, what they learned about us is that as long as they had a wet hole, we would comply. Right. And that's what they extend. Now, when you talk about other groups of women playing chess, that's real. Because those women are not only looking for men, and not only competing for men in their own cultures, they're competing for men
internationally.
And so she's studying. I mean, right now, due to the passport bros, you got women around the world who are studying black men. Every semester, I teach my black male class. I have other racial groups of women studying black men in depth, getting A's. They're not playing because these women understand that relationship is life. It's a very basic concept. If you look at the data, the people that earn most are married couples. But, we have this independence philosophy that we've been hit with, most particularly in regard to our women. We have this belief that men don't need anything but a wet hole. And most of our women are not trained to bring anything else to the table, let alone compete for a man. Why would you compete for something that you're taught is beneath you? He's supposed to come when I call, when I'm ready. What do you mean I have to compete for him? You mean the guy that makes $45,000 a year? Right. I have to compete for him? Hell yeah. Because if you look at the stats, you realize that as much as people talk about black men in our community, black men still do earn more when they're employed. They still earn more. And if you don't want to, someone else will. I got a neighbor right now who met his Latina wife 15 years ago. At the time he lived at home with his parents, he didn't have a job or a car. Their first date was a Netflix and chill. Do you know that woman came over with 3 homemade dishes that she made herself? She treated him like a man of value for that level. She didn't treat him based on what he didn't have. She treated him based on what on the potential and and what she wanted to invest in. And now it's 15 years later. They got 2 kids. Last time I talked to him, the brother's getting ready to leave the state to do his thing on a whole nother level, going into a doctoral program. She saw that in him, and I bet money She invested in that and stimulated that and supported that on a daily basis, not nagging him, not pushing him to do what he didn't want to do, but supporting the things that he was interested in doing. She invested in that when he had nothing.
Right. Right. And I think this Deion Sanders situation is just it's such a perfect metaphor for what's happening with the male female dynamic in our community, because what I've been telling women is, like, yes, we can make fun of men going elsewhere to find women, but the truth is men elsewhere are not running here to find women. We have to be honest about that. We have to be honest about that. The brand around Black women in particular is bad, and we need to deal with it, right? We can't just continue to shame men or say these men are weak or whatever the case may be. And even on top of that, and here goes the metaphor of Deion Sanders, even when you have a good man who did more good for you than you were able to reciprocate for him, after he moves along, whatever the case may be, as opposed to commending him for everything he did positive, that could encourage the next man to want to also come and pour in. You just want to demonize him and break him down because he didn't die there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a real opportunity for Jackson State, if they haven't blown it already, to build off of the legacy that he's already left. Even though he left much earlier than they had planned, there was still a huge opportunity for that. And I think other schools as well. But I think the way they handled it was so blatantly ugly that it's really, it's gonna do the opposite of incentivizing people to want to pick up where he left off.
The thing that was
there that could have been embellished upon.
The thing that's heartbreaking, a lot of people don't know that the basketball coach is Mo Williams. He was in the NBA. He was in the NBA not too long ago. He released a video, a press conference video, probably a couple of days ago, maybe a week or so ago, begging people to show up to the games.
Wow.
You could see the frustration on this man's face. He said, listen, you guys are packing out this 60,000 capacity stadium to watch the football games. The basketball stadium is only 6,000. I'm begging you, show up. So at the end of the day, like, the only thing that led to Jackson State's success these past couple of years, and we have to be honest, is Deion Sanders, because you have another celebrity coach at the same exact school having to beg people to show up to the school. So the next LeBron James, Jerry Rice, if they decide they want to coach, what do they have to look forward to? Frustration, pulling their hair out?
Yeah. I mean, what really, that's why, if you ever work corporate, about that fake niceness that happens in the office. They'll fire you with a smile, boy. But the reality is, even that gesture plays a role. I mean, even when he decided to leave, if they handled that gracefully, even though they're frustrated and pissed, thank you, Coach Sanders, for what you've done. We really appreciate it, blah, blah, blah. If you extend that kind of energy, you offer the opportunity for others to come in and build on what's there, because there's a feeling of good grace. There's a feeling that this can be supported. But when it turns into he ain't shit.
Yeah.
No, but again, I do believe in many ways that is a reflection for how Black men are perceived and treated. I do believe that, because this stuff even happens individually. I've seen Black men marry into situations where they really didn't stand to get much out of it. You marry a woman with 4 kids and you don't even have one yourself, and you're looking to build that family up, support them, and you're treated like you're disposable.
Right.
That's a huge issue. And part of the reason it's an issue is because so many men have had the same experiences that they've started comparing notes. And because that hadn't happened prior to maybe a decade ago, it's still throwing people. It could have happened in the 80s. We just didn't have the platform for it. The situations were occurring. I mean, Black men started moving away from marriage in the 60s for a reason. By the time we got to the 70s, with no-fault divorce being wiped off, everything went awry. All of these things had opportunity to be dealt with earlier, or at least talked about, but we didn't have the platform. Now Black men in the last decade have started to talk about it, and it's scaring people and frustrating people because we've never done it before.
Right.
Who are you to tell me that you're not going to marry me? Who are you to tell me that you're not going to be my man and bring 6 figures in, even though I make 20,000 a year and I demand that you know, who are you to tell me no? Who are you to say, you know, this kind of entitlement is being pushed back on, and people don't know how to deal with it.
Right.
You know, that's where we are, man. So I support Black men pushing back, self-questioning, dialoguing, figuring out what they're looking for, figuring out what they want. I support it. And if any group wants to entice Black men to engage them, first you got to see them as human beings. That's first and foremost.
Worth
and then,
enticing.
Yeah, worth enticing. And then you got to actually pay attention to them enough to really understand what they want. And that was one of the things about Kevin's show that was so revealing. So many women would come up and they would basically, you know, they would put their own values on what they said men were attracted to. Well, I make 6 figures. I have my own house, my own car, my own this, my own that. And Kevin would say, well, whoever told you that that was something men wanted? And you'd see that moment of, oh, what do you mean men don't want that?
Right.
There's this cognitive dissonance moment of, I never thought of that. Yeah, you never bothered to pay attention to what men actually want. You just told yourself and each other what you wanted, and then you imposed it on the men. And that went from everything to physical aesthetics to values. Well, now you got other groups of women who have not ever set foot in North America, who are studying Black men.
Right.
Now, whether they're running a hustle or they're 100% serious, it's a huge step to see groups of women. You know, some of these brothers have never even met women from these racial groups in their own lives. And these women are studying them and saying, look, I am willing to play this role in your life.
Right.
And I'm not even just talking about non-Black women. I'm talking about women, you know, you got African women on the continent who are studying African-American men.
Yeah, that's a fact. That's a fact.
Whoa. And she ain't ever been here. Right. And she's still saying, I got you. Okay.
And for better or worse, like, you know, the uniqueness of Black men that is very seldom like brought up is like black men are pretty liberal when it comes to their expectations of their women, right? Like even to compare Black men here versus Black men on the continent, like Black men on the continent, yeah, they're gonna do all these good things, but like you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do that. Whereas Black men here aren't as rigid, but you still get some of those same benefits, and still it's not enough. Still it's not enough.
It's, man, you know, it's amazing. You know, when you think about you know, Black men in America, you're right. I mean, the progressiveness, you know, the will. I mean, there have been studies that have been done, and Dr. Curry and myself have actually published some of these. Some of these have been done by Black women sociologists that pointed out that Black men were more progressive than other groups. Hell, there are Black men that were more supportive of you know, non-gender role dynamics than Black women themselves. Right? Because Black women go to church, you know, so there's a conservative element there that many Black men don't have. So when you tell Black men that you need to help with the dishes and occasionally cook, Black men are like, okay. I mean, we're the group that's most attentive to our children. We're most involved in their lives, even though we're not marrying like other groups are. So there's, you know, for better or for worse, whether you agree with it or not, there's a progressiveness among Black men here that you don't find in other groups of men. And when you see these men dating internationally, the women will tell you the things he asks for are nothing compared to what the men of my culture require. There's a good brother of mine who's about 58, 59 years old. He married a white woman, actually. You know, but one of the things I noticed in this and I've known him for years, so we talked this through as he was getting to know her. And when he finally laid out to her, he said, look, I'm just going to let you know. And mind you, it took him till he was 50 before he could even say this. He said, I need a woman that takes care of me in the sense of she cooks, she cleans, she does X, Y, and Z. And he laid out what he needed for himself. It wasn't based on what was on the internet. It wasn't based on what others told him to do. He was talking about his own individual life because of the lifestyle he has and the kind of work he does. He said, this is the kind of woman I need. She reflected on it for 3 days. And she said, you know what? You're going to do all of these different things for me, because he laid out what he was going to do for her as well. He said, you're going to do all these things for me, and all you need me to do is take care of you. She was like, hell yeah. And that was the first time in his life he had ever heard a woman realize that he was bringing more to the table than what he was asking for. Now, compound that with a woman who lives in a country where resources are fairly low or whatever else we might want to add to that. If you got brothers that are willing to be reciprocal, supportive, yet what they require, they are laying out there for you. What I think some American women are going to get hit with is how the lists of what men are looking for really isn't as bad as you're making it out to be. And when I hear women talk about men's requirements, there's really a lot of exaggeration. Right. He wants me to get his slippers and kiss his feet when he wakes up. He wants me to walk 10 paces behind him. No, he doesn't. He didn't ask you for none of that. He said he wanted you to cook and clean, especially if he's going to pay the bills and take care of the house. And I had that arrangement with my wife, right? Except, there would be moments where she'd be like, well, I don't want to cook and clean because I'm a woman and I'm a feminist. I shouldn't have to do these things. And I'm like, okay, I'm working 4 jobs and going to school. You're not working at all. Cooking and cleaning is not something I'm imposing on you because you have a vagina. I'm saying that this is what needs to be based on what's going on and the kind of life that I want to live and what I can provide. And I have to have these discussions. Now, this is long before there was a Manosphere, right? Yeah. But these are the kinds of things that Black men are saying. It's not about slavery, because that's how it's presented. Well, these men want us to be slaves. No, it isn't. And these other women in other places will show you it's not about slavery, because when they take those men and they actually have a smile on their face, now you got to ask, how bad was his request really?
Right.
Really? Right. How much was he really asking you to do? Yeah, I don't know. That's going to be a question that I think is going to get answered when more and more women start competing for Black men. You really figure out maybe what he was asking for wasn't that bad.
And shout out to Zuna Thailand, Richie Mack. I've had conversations with him where he said pretty much the stuff that would make a chick here seem extraordinary is average where he is. Like the girl who comes over and, she's cooked you a meal and she makes the bed in the morning, this, and that. Like, that's standard. that's like bare minimum he is, where he's going, versus here. It's like, man, we have been conditioned to expect so little, but have so much expected of us. And you don't realize it until you leave.
Man, I mean, I think Black men here are so, how would I put it? I mean, we're deprived to such a degree when it comes to basic level, niceness and positive. I've seen men buckle at what probably wouldn't even be paid attention to in another country.
It's just sad. It's sad as hell, man.
I'm even losing my words on this one, man. I mean, I know brothers that used to talk about going to diners in the South just because the waitresses would call you honey. It's such a basic level, man, of niceness, of positivity, of being engaged as somebody that is worthy of basic level affection. It really isn't a lot. When I find most brothers are deprived of that, they've never seen it. They've never witnessed it, at least not in their own lives. And when it happens to them, they're usually not ready for it. I mean, really, again, I've had brothers reach out to me when they first started dating in different scenarios, different contexts. And they would call and be like, this woman made me a meal and I didn't ask for anything. I mean, I've told this story before. My boy called me once. He said, I'm sitting here in my living room reading a book, right? He said, I looked down, there's a glass of water. I didn't ask for that, but it was there. He said, okay. He read his book more. He looked down, it was some tea. Looked down again, there was a sandwich. This brother was so off put by this. He was like, why is she doing this?
Yeah, it's a setup. It's a setup.
Yeah. That, and again, going to your point, in another country,
standard practice.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in situations where I've been in relationships where we had whole arguments over me asking for a glass of water. That was considered slavery. And I'm talking about, again, I love my wife, but I'm talking about my wife. Asking for a glass of water. And she was a unicorn compared to many of the women I met.
Right.
Since. Not all, but many. So I'm saying, if it's that difficult for Black men on that consistent a basis, then there's going to be a mass response to the mass absence of basic level affection and respect. There's going to be a response, and you can dismiss it. You can tell these men you don't want them anyway. Well, okay, and that should be, you shouldn't have a problem when these brothers look elsewhere because they're not worth your time anyway. Okay. Well.
But before I let you go, Dr. Johnson, what do you think it would take for women to actually engage in this dialogue in earnest and realize what they could be potentially missing out on if the Passport Bro community continues to build and more examples like Deion Sanders come out that are showing Black boys and showing Black men that you can never do enough, so you might as well just find your own happiness and find your own peace of mind?
Well, let me first add to Deion by saying I had a conversation with Judge Joe Brown a couple of months ago. I've done 4 or 5 maybe shows with him. And one time he said to me something that blew me away because I was pointing out as Generation X, I came up during the time period where the 3-figure income requirement was imposed. And the subtext of that was you'll get respect as long as you meet these standards, and 6 figures being one of them. And he said, young man, you don't get respect when you make 8.
He was speaking about himself.
He was speaking about himself and Black men. He was saying you don't get respect when you make 8 figures. So that goes to what you're saying about Deion, where it's like it's never enough. So going to your question as to what it will take, I think 2 people come to mind who've already laid that out in very simplistic terms. The 2 that come to mind are Kevin and BGS. Kevin said, coming to the conversation in good faith. He talked about coming in good faith a lot. And the reason he talked about it was because it was something that we need to see more of. If you're going to have an honest conversation, you can't come into space just to pick fights, especially if Black men are purposely talking to one another. You're not even invited into certain spaces, and you're seeing people come in just to have arguments. That's not coming in good faith. One of the things BGS talked about was a redress of grievances. In other words, we've listened to everything that you believe is wrong with Black men for at least 40 years, if not 50. At what point do you listen to Black men beyond your fears of what we're saying means? In other words, a lot of people didn't listen to Kevin. They listened to what others said about Kevin. Because Kevin would even talk about that. They'd come on his show with an opinion about him, and he'd say, well, have you listened to my show? Well, no, but my girlfriend told me about you. I've heard family members say this very thing. I've heard them talk. I've had family members and women that I've known for years who've said the same things about me. Well, you hate women. Okay. Well, when did I say that? Well, the guys in your comments don't seem to like women much. I said, well, yeah,
right.
What did I say?
Right.
And then what you find is not only did they not watch any of the shows I've done, and I got, again, family members who haven't watched not one show. I have, who've not read one paper, who've not read one publication that I put out, but will tell me what I think about women. But so they're not listening to us. They're listening to their emotional or response to us. They're listening to the reflections of other women about us. It's more about how they feel about what's being said rather than what's actually being said. Right. So there needs to be a redress of grievances where you actually do have to hear Black men's frustrations and issues because they are real. They have real world impact. They affect the quality of one's life. Again, go through that first out of the 16-point political agenda, Black male political agenda. The majority of those points in family reform are about things that Black men directly experienced. It's not fabrications. It's just not picking at women just because they feel like picking at women. It's real world policies that affect how these men live. They're living on their mother's couches. They're living damn near homeless and are employed behind some of the things that are done. So first and foremost, that redress of grievances is real in terms of addressing what Black men have experienced and actually hearing it and not just listening to argue, right? Which is tied to coming into the discussion in good faith. And if you're not willing to do it, the advantage of a group of women that don't have any angst or antipathy or resentment toward men becomes that much more appealing. Sometimes the attraction you might have to a woman from another culture is simply because she comes at you with no resentment, right?
Right.
I mean, again, Kevin used to say, some men will go down in attractiveness to go up in cooperativeness.
I've been trying to preach. And that's why I bring up the Asian woman thing. Asian women are not thick. Asian women are not these curvaceous sex symbols like our women are here, but yet and still they're the most desired, and we have to look at that.
That's a lot of different, it's a lot of different issues that play into, and a lot of the time it's dismissed as something that's hypersexual, right? You know, when you have this whole conversation about whether it's passport bros or dating abroad or dating in any other non-traditional context for Black men historically, it's distilled into, well, you just want to have sex with white women, or you just want to use these women from that country for sex. Yeah, I'm sure there are brothers that do that. There are women that do that go to other countries for that. That's not hard to find. But I think people drastically underestimate how many brothers are looking for serious girlfriends, serious wives. I think they severely underestimate how many Black men are serious about finding long-term companionship. I think they underestimate it, and they dismiss it as something that's purely sexual. I think you're gonna miss out on a lot of good men like that.
Oh man, and I brought it up earlier. Like, some of the feedback that I'm seeing now that I'm back on TikTok, a lot of the feedback is now coming from women again, and it's frustrating, man. Like, I get some of the critiques from, you know, the passport bros, the save yourself bros, because of my personal stance. But like, literally, just like Kevin, just like you know, other people who've tried to talk to women, it's like, even that, if you're not doing it a certain way, if you're not, even though my tone is relatively good, it's still not good enough, right? Like, it's never ever enough, and it's frustrating, man. It's frustrating.
I'm telling you this as somebody that sat through, like, I started college in 1992. I finished my doctorate in 2008. I sat in feminist courses, Black feminists, white feminists. I sat in so many different courses that were really about, in terms of the way they approach feminism, it really came down to villainizing men. And what the reason I raise that is the expected posture that I was supposed to take, as far as many of these women were concerned, including the professors, was to be quiet. To be quiet, and if I spoke, I needed to apologize for men as a group. You know what I mean? Which meant that I had to take all of the critiques and treat them as valid with no pushback. That was the only way I would be respected in those spaces. If I held that mantle of, you're right, everything you're saying about us is right. The problem is, now that men are starting to speak, women are still bringing that entitlement, many, I should say, into the discussions, rather than those that are coming in saying, you know what, we need to hear what the men are saying. And if we're going to push back, it needs to be done with some respect, because, you know, I've been in situations where not only could I not push back even when respectful, but my grade was based on whether or not they liked my response. Right? Me graduating with a degree was based on how, you know what I'm saying? I had to actually engage this in an environment where my career
do or die,
was on the line. We're talking about online discussions. You got people that won't even come into the discussion in good faith, even though they have nothing to lose. You're not going to get an F and not be able to graduate. All you got to do is actually listen and respectfully engage, and not do so from the standpoint of being defensive and attacking back just because you're angry about what's being said, rather than, as I told one woman in the comments who didn't like what some of the brothers were talking about on one of my shows, I said, well, has it ever crossed your mind that maybe you should ask yourself what these brothers experienced that brought them to this opinion that you don't like? Is it that they are just being hateful to be hateful, or did these brothers actually have an experience that led them to the position they're at? Did you bother to ask? Did you bother to listen? Men, by and large, usually have a reason for the things that they're arguing about. Did you bother to ask them? Well, no, I already know. How do you know? You ain't talked to these brothers before. You don't know them. You know, but that kind of nuance doesn't, I don't think it's there anywhere near as much as it needs to be. And some of that needed to happen 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Some of that needed to happen 5 years ago. You know, it's something Dennis Sperling said in regard to Kevin. He said, Kevin, as much as some people may have hated him, he was really about trying to repair the Black community. He was talking about families. He was talking about marriage. He was talking about people coming back together again. Once he died, conversations went a very different way. Especially after we saw how he was regarded.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And there was only one Kevin. There was 100 different Steve Harveys.
Right.
Were telling women what they wanted to hear about men. You had one Kevin pushing back against that in a different way. And the level of vilification was ridiculous. And after he passed, conversation went, went a whole different direction. And I just, I hope at some point that people are willing to actually listen. But there's a long history of what Black men have endured that has not seriously been engaged, even in the academy. Yeah. Even in the academy. So it's time. It's past time.
Absolutely. Listen, Dr. Johnson, I know you got to get back to grading. Thank you so much for pulling up. I'm not doing a 4-hour stream today, so I don't know if you have time. Can you have take some calls maybe, or you got to go?
Sure, we can do a little bit of that. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Cool.
up all night anyway.
Awesome. I'll drop the link in the chat. I saw some comments saying that some people wanted to come up, so I just wanted to respect your time. But what are your thoughts on I don't know if you've had a chance to see any of my recent interviews, and I started another series called the Black Marriage Masterclass, trying to appeal to see if this can truly be a middle ground. BGS called it the purple pill. He said my channel is the purple pill. And I'm still not seeing that happen. I'm still seeing men are the ones engaging, and the women who are engaging are already, married, or already get it. But for the ones who don't get it, I think I'm not seeing them engage with the content the way that I thought once I went in that direction.
So you're saying the single women aren't really engaging?
I'm not seeing it. I'm not, like all the Black love folks, I'm not seeing them here.
I think the way a lot of this has been marketed to women is that, again, the Steve Harveys, even some of the YouTube personalities, it's really based around what women want and how they want it presented. They're selling to women because there's a built-in incentive to do so. I mean, look, if you're a content creator, if you're talking either, to white folk or to women, your channel is going to grow. Your income is going to grow. If you're just talking, especially in the Black manosphere, you're just talking to Black men, your channel is going to stay at a fairly low level. It's like hip hop.
People don't understand that. People do not understand
that. It's real. It's like hip hop in the 80s. If you were only selling to Black folks, the best you could do is go gold. As soon as you start selling to white folk, you can go platinum. It's the same thing happening on YouTube. So these, there are many people that have a built-in incentive to engage women on women's terms, right? Yeah. Kevin was probably the only one we saw that could push back and be critical and still have women calling in every night. But for the most part, and I'm not saying this is everybody, but for a good number of content creators, they feel the need to appeal. And the problem with that is then you gotta find a way to sell them what they want. If you're willing to have this dialogue you're trying to have, where there's got to be some pushback on either side, women have a bunch of other channels they can go to where they don't have to get pushback.
Right.
Where they can be told exactly what they want to hear, even though it doesn't result in anything substantive in their lives. Feels good to hear, the same rhetoric that's been sold to them for decades. Right. So you're going to go somewhere that's going to feed you medicine. You're going to go somewhere that's going to feed you fast food.
And that's what's frustrating, especially, my audience is a bit more half and half than like the majority of the manosphere, just because of women being on the thumbnail. And one of the critiques was, we need to see more married couples. We need to see this. We need to see that. And unfortunately, when I deliver, it's still not going back to the theme of this. It's still not enough. It's still not good enough. It's still not done. It's still not catering to us enough. And I understand why some men get to the point where they're like, fuck it. I'm going to just go where I'm appreciated. I'm going to go where, there's some reciprocation. Even in the animal kingdom, if you're the alpha male, yes, you get to eat first, you get to have sex first. But when danger comes, you're expected to protect the pride or the community, whatever the case may be, there's reciprocity. But in our community in particular, it seems to be the case that it's just what's expected of you, and you should be okay with the crumbs you receive in return.
Yeah, shut up and serve.
Yeah,
yeah, and that's the problem. If you're cultivating men who are not going to shut up and serve, but are going to have something to say, and it doesn't always have to be negative, you know what I mean? But if they're going to have something to say, that's a different narrative, you know. And it's an interesting contradiction, because the depiction of men and women we got, especially in the 80s, was that women were told to shut up and serve, and men were these patriarchs that oppressed people. But when you get down to the brass tacks, you actually find that the men were told to shut up and serve, right? So, and the women could make whatever decisions they want. This is why I go back to the grandfather analogy. How many of you know your grandfather's first and last name? The one who died a few decades ago, putting Big Mama in the house she's in, right?
Yeah.
He died serving. Shut up and serve. You know, that's the dynamic that we're starting to point out, and a lot of people have issues with it. So yeah, you got your work cut out for you, you know, because when they say they want more marriages, you got to, you know, deconstruct what that really means. And for a lot of people, it means we want men to just provide, protect, more than I do, pay for this, pay for that. And I may give him affection or love if and when I feel like it, but he needs to do all of these things to be worthy of my time and attention.
Right.
That dynamic in and of itself is not going to work.
Yeah. It's not sustainable either. That's the biggest thing, because you get to the point, like with Deion, like how many times is your office going to be broken into, or your son's car is going to be broken into before you decide, man? And then there's no there's no even corrective action being done afterwards. No, I'm sorry. No, thank you. No, we appreciate your patience. Nothing.
Wow.
Man.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you know, at some point, you know, black men are going to have to be treated based on how valuable they actually are. And if that's not something you can talk a woman into, then it's something that the environment and the conditions of the world will bring about, possibly in other groups of women, other arrangements. You know, many of these brothers took a long time before they started talking about going abroad. Hell, there's a lot of brothers that took a long time before they could even date interracially in their own communities, and I mean in their own immediate living situation. There's a lot of brothers who, you know, who really, because I was born in the 70s. My father was a Panther. I came out of a nationalist context. You know, there's a lot of brothers that did, and it took a long time before some of those brothers would even start talking about dating otherwise. But there just comes a point where if you're not going to be respected, you got to go where you're valued. And you know, and for men, this is crucial, because men function and thrive on respect. We even process love through respect. We're not women. We don't process it through adoration. We process it through respect. And if that respect isn't there, we'll find it elsewhere.
Yeah. So I've got Mr. Ron House in the back. Ron, I'm gonna bring you up. Yeah, I'm gonna bring you up real quick to chop it up with the doctor. How you doing, brother?
Oh, good, brothers. How y'all doing, man? Good to see y'all, Dr. Johnson.
Good to see you too. Good to
How
see
you
you.
doing,
Much respect.
Shout out to Dr. Thunder real quick, but it's good to meet you, man.
Good. To you, Obi, 51 or 50 plus K, man.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Much respect, man. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
As you always say, God bless your life.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, Dr. Johnson. I watch your content as well. My question for Dr. Johnson is, and Obi as well, when we're talking about Deion Sanders, I think going back to Obi's library of language, context and nuance, I think that, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, I mean the average Joe black guy or black person or black community thought about Deion in terms of the HBCU. If you think about Deion during his playing career, football, a little bit more than baseball, but all of it is entertainment too. It has a really big entertainment component to it. And Deion, as much as he was skilled at both sports, was an entertainer. He had the gravitas, he had the language, he had the connectivity to our community, not just Black, but white people, or other people. I don't know if I should say that or not, but and so it resonated. And I think that fast forward to him going to the HBCU. If you can remember, he was trying to be, or at least pursued being a head coach in high school, or at least for a high school team.
Wow.
And couldn't get a job being a high school coach, and opened up his own school. Now, he wasn't the administrator, but he kind of ran the athletic department, and specifically was the head coach of the football team, which they had a really good seasons. I think 3 in a row that they were close to being undefeated, and at least in their league won a state title. The same with him applying to a PWI in terms of being a head coach, because he didn't, or at least one of the things was, he didn't have the resume to be a head coach at a PWI. Jackson State offered him position to be a head coach of their football team. So as much as we don't think that these exchanges were, or at least missed in terms of it being reciprocal, like, I think that Black people, and I'll just use myself for an example, because of that resume in terms of him being a football player / entertainer, he was able to shine a light on, because of who he was. And I'm glad that Obi said something about Mo Williams being a professional basketball player. Did not have the same celebrity, did not have the same entertainment value as Deion Sanders. He didn't have the household name in terms of someone you can just recognize just by first name recognition. And so when Deion, and I'm one of the things in the many things that he said, because he would use social media, at least his son orchestrated using social media as an instrument for him to give inspirational speeches, for him to advertise, because their marketing budget, compared to, the Big 5 conferences, it had no comparison. So one of the examples was when some of the Power 5 schools would play some D2 schools or lower D1 schools or HBCUs, and then they were giving them, in terms of their budget, to come to those 90 to 120,000 seat stadiums and just take a beating. I mean, it'd be a 70-point spread, but they couldn't cover all of the team's expenses that was traveling. So what one of the things Deion said, and he was talking about HBCUs, is we need to be able to negotiate these deals if we're going to take those kinds of, being pummeled that way, so that they can get a win at the earlier part of their schedule, which is soft, that we need to negotiate in the millions of dollars, not just Jackson State, but Alcorn State, North Carolina A&T, Mississippi Valley, whatever HBCU it was. And his tentacles didn't just reach into Jackson State, it reached across all HBCUs. Now, there were men who undergirded, or who were pillars in those programs, who didn't have the gravitas that Deion had. And so even though it was one band, one sound, there were other people working behind the scenes who had the expertise to elaborate on making those kinds of deals. So I think the thing, or the expectation was, or the hope was, that Deion could stay longer, permeate throughout the HBCU, make it so competitive that a top tier Black athletes, at least playing football, and maybe even basketball or baseball or running track, that meant that the Power 5s had to really compete for their talent. And if there was, and Dr. Johnson just did a stream, a live, where he was talking about the Black Renaissance for films. If this movement where guys were young athletes and their families are really thinking about saying, you know what, maybe we should send our son or our daughter who is, high tier, top tier, to an HBCU. Because now they're starting to be on ESPN, ESPN Plus, ESPN2. They're starting to show these games. So I think that him coming to not just Jackson State, but being an HBCU umbrella, it brought a lot of attention to it. And so what does that mean now, even though you have like a Eddie George or Coach Jackson down in Grambling, or you have Mo Williams, who's a head basketball coach at Jackson State, who have the expertise, but don't have the same gravitas, don't have the same connectivity, even though they have pro connections and have played sports or coached sports on the highest levels, can actually now make what Deion has done or has brought to Jackson State or HBCUs more sustainable. And I think it lends itself to what you're talking about right now. How in having an honest conversation about relationships and marriage and legacy, how can, because I listen to OB's show, I listen to your show, how can that become, at 50,000, subscribers plus, become the new benchmark for being this digital library that that people can come to and have an honest conversation and say, I don't know what I don't know. Mm-hmm. And it has some autonomy to it, because I can just look at it on a video and really use it as this research tool and really use it as this reference point to say, I never really thought about what Black men want. And even Black men saying, I never knew that I could make requests, or I hate to say make demands, but have a standard where I can be like, this is the bare minimum. Mm-hmm. This is where I'm coming from. So I guess I'm making more of a statement than asking a question, is that, relationships for Black men who are going to be with Black women, we're going to have to take, again, I hate to, use language like this, is that we're going to have to take some scratch and dent. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to work with not just ourselves, but the women that we take in, under our covering, and work through some trauma. Mm-hmm. And be an example to those who we, if we do have children and start creating our legacy, can breed that out of the old relationship models. We are going to have to at least dip in our bag and say, take the least damaged fruit. We're going to have to take some bruised apples, maybe a little bit of discolored watermelon, a smaller orange, but they can be just as sweet. But it's going to take some, a labor of love on our part.
Well, I mean, my most, immediate response would be, that's actually been what brothers have been doing. Mm-hmm. That's right. The problem where we're having now is you got, especially younger generations of men saying, why do I have to keep taking the same fruit my father took, my grandfather took, when especially there's a market across the street that is marketing the same fruit that's fresher, that's not discolored or bruised at a cheaper price. I mean, and that's a poor example for the point that I'm making, because I don't want to reduce people to fruit.
Right. I don't. Yeah, I was just
at the end of the day, where is the incentive? What exactly do Black men get for making this sacrifice of navigating trauma? Because understand too, and I don't mean this as if you don't understand it. I'm assuming you do, because Black men don't get to your age without understanding it. That navigating that trauma with her, it directly affects our quality of life and our life expectancy. We already have the lowest life expectancy. I can pretty much bet you've dealt with that stress in your life before. You know what it means to take responsibility for someone who's damaged and try and work through that trauma, right? But what happens when you have somebody that comes to you and says, okay, Ron, I want to be your comfort and I want us to work through this together, and you're not going to have to risk your life dealing with my trauma. I want to bring you peace. What happens when that happens? So you're looking at trauma on one end, you're looking at peace on another, and you're of a certain age. If I can ask, how old are you?
54.
54. So you've had some projects, you've been in some situations over the years. You know, you've taken those very bumps you talked about ago. I'm not saying which one you're going to choose. I'm saying these are the options that many Black men are finding themselves, you know, grappling with. And it's like, well, you know, I know what goes down this one road, you know, the traumatic road you talked about. I've been there. My father's been there. My grandfather's been there. My uncles have been there. My brothers have been there. I've seen it, you know, but now is that the only way to go? And I think part of what this is coming down to, whether we're talking about Deion or whether we're talking about us, is at some point, Black men are actually going to have to be treated based on what they are actually, based on their value. Now, we could deal with that in terms of being progressive and supportive and loving partners who are attentive to children. We could deal with it materially in terms of income. I find the income thing helps make the example, but I don't mean to say that all we are is income.
Right.
Put it to you this way. If you make $43,000 a year, do you know that you make more than 78% of the Black community?
No.
So if the average brother making $43,000 a year makes more than almost 80% of the community, should he be valued?
Right.
Do we think the average brother who makes that is valued?
No.
And we can apply that same logic to, you know, caretaking children, to being loving husbands. The same logic, I think, applies in all of these different areas, whether they're dealing with internal issues or materialistic issues. The problem is, in my assessment, that Black men are not valued for what they actually are. And I think Deion, in the same kind of way, like you said, he had that it factor. He had the name recognition. There was so much that he could have done. Do we think Jackson State treated him based on what he brought to the table, based on the potential of what he could have built? When the man is arguing over whether or not there's 60,000 people in attendance at his game, and they're telling him it's 20-something thousand, does that sound like they treated him with the respect that he was due?
Right. I think what he was able to do, and I think you're right. No, if it unequivocally no, but I think the cutting corners and the baling wire and bubble gum of HBCUs, the practice of cutting corners, even when Deion came, because he did bring to light in terms of practices, in terms of business practices, in terms of financial practices. He brought to light that there were some practices that didn't cut the mustard, that didn't pass the smell test. And so on occasion, just an excerpt of what he said was, hey, look, we have to get our own house in order. Without calling out names, he was talking about best practices weren't best practices, and they weren't sustainable. And that needed to be done. That's okay, because he had the levity to bring that to the forefront, and let's have a conversation about it. He was willing to do that, and they understood that as well. And that's the other reason I thought that, for selfish reasons, I should have started off by saying that when I started the whole thing, that I wanted him to stay at Jackson State to kind of air out the dirty laundry in a creative way, that he could generalize, but behind closed doors, conversations are different with our partners or significant others. There's a public face and then there's a private face. And so just like you all elaborated to, or the conversation went in the direction of the relationship when they went their separate ways, it wasn't gracious.
Right.
It could have been done in a way that could have ingratiated him, ingratiated the university, ingratiated all HBCUs. Like, this is the new HBCU. This is how we conduct business. And here's, our North Star. Again, I'm using Obi's language in terms of Dr. Obi's language in terms of, his back and forth. So it didn't get done that way. And I think if they go back and look at not the game tape of playing, but the game tape of business and say, okay, what can we do different? And so and I don't going back and forth, I'm on a rabbit trail. That's the same thing with the Black Manosphere or the Red Pill or Black Manosphere, Red Pill adjacent is when you said what's going to be different, because we've been going through this trauma, my father, my grandfather, me, my great grandfather. What's different? Well, now we, men are, have this video library of their grievances. I think that the barbershop talk, which was kind of private, or the Black Man Social Club, is now on, you can stream it.
Yeah.
I can't even have this particular conversation in the barbershop anymore because it's turned into a business where everything's by appointment. So you don't get the random guys just coming in, waiting an hour and a half to get a haircut. And then we're talking about, issues of the day. Now everything is one in, one out, maybe two there. It doesn't have even that same feel. So now this electronic media is the new, Black Man Social Club. And so I think that is what's different when Dr. Johnson and Obi are talking about the ills in our relationship, and here are the remedies that we can use. It's, the patient's in the bed and the medicine's working really, really slow through the drip. But we're seeing some changes, though incremental and small, and in maybe not so large degrees. We can start seeing those changes, because even with the passport bros or Save Yourself Black Men, there are not a lot of guys that's not going to be able to leave. So you're going to have to deal with, in terms of the people in our community, in terms of, like, at the end of the day, and I think Obi said this, is like, it's a political decision. I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just real quick, the interesting thing about what you said, though, about the people who can afford to leave, the problem is we've heard for decades that there are just not enough good Black men for women, just not enough. And I think what the Manosphere helped to explain was it never was about whether or not there was enough. There weren't enough top 5 and 10% men. Because when you really broke down what women wanted, more often than not, whether they even knew it or not, they were talking about top 5 and 10% men. They refused to look at the men that they were around every day. Those 5 and 10% men are the ones who can go overseas and are starting to reflect on whether or not they should. And this is what scares people. Everybody isn't going to do it. I mean, we probably have, the Black community is one of the smallest communities in terms of passport, obtaining passports. Because of our wealth status. But the ones who can afford to are the ones that are reflecting on it. And this is scaring the crap out of a lot of women who understand that in order to have a passport, in order to do that travel, you got to have certain things in your life put together. And if those are the men that are leaving, now you got to pay more attention to the ones you were ignoring in the first place. That's a whole new dynamic. And that's what's on the table, really. So I agree with you. It was never about the majority of Black men going, but it was about the class status of the ones who could go. And what that means for women's choices after that. Whether we like it or not, whether they like it or not, other groups of men are not kicking down doors to not only, as Alan said, be with American women, but Black American women. There's not a lot of groups of men. There are no groups of men kicking down doors to do it. The men who want Black women are Black men. That's the dominant group that wants Black women. But this class stratification is taking on whole new meaning when you talk about passport bros. And if it's not dealt with seriously, it's going to have a strong impact class wise, for quite a while.
And my biggest issue with the treatment of the situation is there was an air of from Jackson State, and even some people in our community towards Deion, there was an air of shut up and dribble. There was an
Yes.
air of stay in
Right.
your place. There was an air of you
Yes.
owe us this, regardless of if we dialogue with you as somebody who is bringing all these benefits that we can rattle off. And for me, I don't think anybody can take that for a long period of time, doing all the work and benefiting the other party in all these ways with none of the appreciation.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that just dealing with people in general, and I know we're just talking about mainly our community. When I say our community, I mean Black people. It's two things. It's a labor of love, and it's a lot of heavy lifting. It's the one thing that, in terms of its fluidity, that can change by the time you wake up in the morning, and maybe even faster than that. There are things in our lives that, I heard this from someone. They were talking about children, but I guess it can work with adults as well. They were talking about, I'll just use the child analogy. And it's kind of what I was doing when I was trying to rear my children. There was two schools of thoughts. One was that you're either a gardener, and you may have heard this, or you're a woodworker. And a woodworker, and I'll try to be real quick, is a person who can control his environment. So you got a wood shop, you got a particular kind of tools, you could control the airflow, the materials that you bring in, those sorts of things. A gardener has to deal with the elements, fertilizer. Is the crop going to yield the same as it did last year? Can I keep the rabbits out, the moles out, the deer out? What kind of fencing I use? How I control, the elements. And so when we were working with our kids, it was like we were trying to woodwork. We were trying to control the environment. We were trying to control the materials. We were trying to control the airflow. And they were more like gardening. 1 year would be really, really good, and they would be consistent, and there would be some drop off somewhere because of their internal changes. And then we had to go back and make incremental changes because they were getting older and their interests became different. And keeping up the guardrails, where the weeds growing outside the guardrails, then we had to prune and all this other kind of stuff. So what I mean is that the application we're using to try to take care of something we might be using the wrong tools. And so we're out here trying to woodwork, and we really should be gardening, or vice versa. And my expectations for, and as I was listening to Dr. Johnson, because I got a really long, well, not really long, about a 45-minute drive home from work. I'm able to listen to the podcast, and you were talking about your son and the hesitation, and this is not verbatim, or the resistance to not follow him in a way that you could make sure that he was protected. And that really, really resonated with me because I only have one son. I got 4 daughters. They're older, and he's the youngest. And that really, really resonated with me as like, because he's an introvert, because his engagement to society is a lot different than mine. I'm really a people person. I'm outgoing. My daughters are outgoing. They're risk takers. My son is very conservative. He's very much to himself. At the time that, Trayvon Martin had his life taken from him, my son wears a hoodie. And for a person who doesn't express himself, and he may, in the way that I do, and he may have encountered a police officer or someone of authority, they might thought he was very standoffish or very dismissive of them. And so I said that to say, like, my son's engagement he's 19, to females. His preference for culturally how his like I said, my daughters are very spirited people, and you can extrapolate from that, and their mother is too, which is my ex-wife, but he didn't lean towards Black women because he didn't find them at that age, at 19, I guess 17 to 21 or 22. He didn't find them to have the kind of calmness that he needed. Like when he and I talk, we just talking like you and I are talking right now. I don't have to yell at him. I don't have to scream at him. We can just have a conversation, and he can extrapolate from that, or he can and so they were very just spirited talking, and loud and boisterous, not to be intimidating or mean. It's just that this age where women can be unabashed in their approach to different things and how they're explaining it, how do you get from point A to point B? And then to have a logical, analytical conversation and be like, okay, I understand that. And not one that's driven on the river of emotion.
I think what you're pointing out is that young men who are introverted, a little quiet, their particular brand of masculinity is not well received in our community. Most particularly, our women don't value that type of masculinity.
Right.
And those young men are the ones that, especially if they end up being successful, will end up probably finding themselves doing some of the things we're talking about here in the Manosphere, because it's not lauded, it's not supported, it's not seen as something worthy of competing for. It doesn't get them very much attention. Yeah, I get it. My son,
right. And to your point, he has a vision. He has a plan. He has thoughts. Now, they may be a little choppy, but for the most part, what I'm doing is just stress testing it. I'm not saying the plan is good or bad. I'm just stress testing to see, are these things that you've considered? And so, to your point, if masculinity is seen in a particular way as having a lot of bravado and having a lot of, peacocking, and he's quiet and to the back, and he's slowly ascending past his peers who are more seen. You wouldn't know that at his age, if you were a female, that this guy's got some value. This particular person has some vision for his age, where people are still trying to find themselves out. I'm not saying that he's not still trying to figure things out. He much is trying to figure things out. But there's a particular lane that he's in that lends itself to an upward trajectory at a faster pace, but it's quiet and it's unassuming. So these, I guess, he falls in this 80% of guys. I mean, he's still, really young, but he falls into this space of young men who that are just not being considered. And so the sample size that I'm seeing is that he's looking for other alternatives. And
he'll find it. He'll find it. And there's a way, and I'm saying this as an introvert. Once you find your groove, there's a way to be seductive, to be attractive, to be all of that, and be introverted, and be the quietest one in the room. The difference, though, I tend to find is that it tends to manifest in the maturity of the woman in question. And so, it's going to be more mature women that can see the value in someone like him, and it'll probably include more non-traditionally Black women, that will pay him that kind of attention. It is what it is, and they will start to make their way toward him, and and he'll find his groove, especially if he's working at improving himself. It can work. I mean, you don't have to be brazen and peacock and all of that. It helps in terms of attracting the kind of quote unquote typical Black woman that we can talk about. But as they grow and get more mature, there are different kinds of women that come into the picture.
Right.
And, he'll kind of experience his bloom a little later than some of the more gregarious guys.
Right. Right. And it's and my thing is just not what had given him I wouldn't even say a wider margin of error, but just giving him a broader range to have those experiences. And it's not in a reckless way. Because he's just not that kind of guy. He doesn't hang out, he games. And that lends itself to a particular kind of interaction with people. But what I've always tried to get him to do is just interact outside of the electronic lifestyle. Is to interface with people, not force it, but just put him in situations. Because when we used to go to the barbershop, he wouldn't speak to anybody. Yeah. I would always go and speak to all the barbers, It took about a year for him to follow behind me and start dapping guys up.
Yeah, but he did it. But he did it.
He did it.
Do it. You modeled it for him. He did it. But like I said, he'll find his groove. I mean, you look at the quiet, meditative dudes like Alan, and now Alan.
Right.
He can't keep him off of him.
With 50K.
Once you find your groove, being quiet don't have to mean you alone. Take notes on Alan. Look at him.
Hey, Ron, I appreciate it, man. I wanted you to get your last word in, so we can go ahead and start wrapping up.
No. Hey, look, what I would say, I really appreciate you, brothers, man. Keep, trudging forward, man. This is greatly needed, man, in the most desperate way. All accolades to you, brothers, man. And I, really, really appreciate you, man. Like I said, I usually get to these things kind of late. So, when you're looking at those numbers, man, give me like a 24-hour window, man, and I'm gonna hit that like button and keep my things up and contributions up and this, that, and the third, man. But keep doing what y'all doing, man. And I'm just gonna listen, man, and I'm gonna stay with the stream until you guys are off, man. But I really appreciate it, man, and keep doing what y'all doing.
Absolutely. Thank you, man.
No, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, brothers.
All right. All right, Dr. Johnson, I want to give you the last word. I know you have work to do.
I do have to go, but I see there's a couple brothers in the waiting room that, if you don't mind, I'd like to at least greet them if I can't stay.
Okay. I'll just bring everybody up at once.
Okay.
Let me do that. And we got the GOAT Wrench in the building as well. Salute. But yeah.
What's good with y'all?
How's it going, Dr. T?
What's going on?
What's up, man?
Brother, if I could be like you when I grow up, I'll be all right.
Here you go.
Same, man. Same.
Peace to the brothers. I heard them in the back chat. I said, man, I got to at least greet the brothers. They've been waiting patiently. So
good, man.
How y'all doing?
Good.
Wait for that book. Make a book.
Just got the green light from Rutledge Publishing last week. So yeah, book is coming.
Can I ask a question though? Like, because I read Dr. Curry's A Man's Not, and I thought about that for you, and I'm just like, that's one of my concerns. And I don't know if his situation, like if he was tenured, before he wrote that book, but is that a concern for you that they might make you go to Scotland too?
Well, yeah, he was tenured, but where he was in Texas got pretty hot. I mean, he had threats against his family, and when he was interested in going elsewhere, there were a couple of places that wanted him, but they weren't really willing to put it on the wood the way they needed to, and a lot of places avoided him because of the work he did. And he and I would talk about that because I was going through the same thing. I would interview at places, I get down to the top 2. And then, I'd find out I didn't get the position, which is fine. But then I'd have somebody on the hiring committee, call me under the table and say, hey, man, let me tell you what happened. They started looking at your publications. They started calling you these kind of names, blah, blah, blah. And I had the same things happening with journals and different places I was trying to publish. So what I decided to do is the opposite of Tommy. Tommy published like crazy. I think in 2021, he might have wrote maybe, I don't know, like 70 pieces. I mean, the man is a machine. I did the opposite. I stopped publishing and I started doing YouTube. And because when you're an academic and you're trying to work through ideas, you publish something and you get feedback from people, and that's how you really begin to build your thought process. But if you can't get it published, nobody will publish it, you're just kind of working in this silo by yourself. So I came to YouTube to develop my ideas, to engage people, to actually get feedback, to go back and forth. And then the next thing I knew, publishers started calling me. Right. So I kind of went the opposite way as Tommy, and I'm about to start publishing, whereas he just started publishing earlier on. But yeah, the kind of difficulty comes with when you're doing this work and you're not tenured, you stand to really, have to worry about whether or not you have a job. So I was tenured, Tommy was tenured. So it wasn't so much a matter of worrying about not having a job. It was more a matter of, where you could be. I'm still in Fresno. He had to go to Scotland,
So
yeah.
Can I give you some free marketing advice? I was thinking about you the other day, just because, especially when you said you were coming out with a book. I would love it if you could possibly do a debate with FD Signifier. Every time I see that charlatan, fake ass academic, because he didn't have the wherewithal or the discipline to get his doctorate, but he's out here talking a lot of shit about a lot of people who actually put the work in. So I would love to
making
see
a lot of money doing it. Yeah.
Yes, he is. And I would love to see if it would be possible. I put it look, I'll buy tickets. If we're gonna do this review style, I'll put a
rent out a venue. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to see this, because I would love to see how his ideas stand up to somebody who isn't soaked in by the gynocracy. Someone who actually push back with data and actually opposing views that he can't simply dismiss as nonsensical. And you're perfect for that.
I mean, I last I heard, he was supposed to do a show about me. He was on Jared Ball's talking shit, and I said, all right, I'll wait for the show, and he never did. But I think if I remember correctly, somebody paid him to come after the Manosphere or something of that nature. And once he did what he was paid to do, I think he just went back to it. And then he had a guest on, and they kind of came at Tommy a certain kind of way. Which I had actually talked to Tommy about, and he just laughed. He said, man, this is ridiculous. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I think you're not going to get a cat like that to argue or debate unless you pay him, and as far as that's concerned. But I can really care less, man. I'm really trying to focus on, producing the kind of work that will help brothers. That's my focus. And that's all I really.
But I want to get you paid, though. I want to see you, I want to see dudes like you and Alan get paid, because it's look, it's great that y'all are doing work for the community, and I love that. But what's more important to me is that you guys are financially compensated for this. And this just isn't a fucking labor of love, because I've seen too many brothers do that same shit. I'm doing it for the community and applaud them. But 10 years from now, we don't hear about them, think about them, or anything like that.
I hear you.
Excuse me. So in order to do that, everybody has a YouTube channel. There's no reason why no one can make clips and share them from the doc, share them from Alan, share them from BGS, share them from the whole group. We're not doing enough advertising for ourselves. And going back to the original topic of Deion, I think everybody got it wrong. They didn't look at his entire team. If you look at him in high school and college, he said out of his mouth that he saw that the DBs were the lowest paid. So he made as much as noise as possible. So he's been advertising for himself since 17, 18. That's crazy. He was back then what his son is today. How he knows how to advertise, how he knows how to do those things. He always was talking about taking his team up. If you look at some of the videos, his son, with his son recording, the cheerleading coach is his. I've never seen a football coach own a cheerleader. They're usually separate, but that's his cheerleading coach. He brought her all the way up to Colorado State. So if you look at it, no matter what happened at the HBCU, he was still going to move up and move all of his people up. That's what it's about. He's giving everybody exposure. Then everyone names those basketball players and all that. There's only one Deion. There's not too many. I mean, if you're going to go off showboats, before him, who we had, Ali. It's not too many people that did that. So we can't say that somebody else could have came up and did what Deion did. With the misuse of the funds and all that, I don't go to HBCU. I'm a tech guy. I just study, get a cert. Next thing you know, my income go up. But for the HBCUs, we know it's always been a misuse of funds and all those type of things, all type of scandals. Thank you, gentlemen. That's my time, and I look forward.
Appreciate it, King.
Yeah, I got a word on it too, if you don't mind me.
Yes, sir.
How y'all doing, Brian?
Good, man. Good. How you?
Good.
I'm fine. Dr. Johnson, big fan of yours. Pleasure of mine. Always wanted to speak with you.
I appreciate it. And shout out to King. I didn't get to say bye, but wish you well, brother.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
shout
bro.
out.
I'm actually an HBCU student myself. I go to Southern University in Baton Rouge.
Okay.
So I've been meaning to talk to you because I believe there's a rash of hypocrisy. And like I said, I won't be long. I just wanted, and if I've been hammering this point a lot, it's only because I'm just shocked and a little scared of the I wouldn't say scared, but just a little frightened of the amount of hypocrisy I've been seeing lately in regards to Deion Sanders leaving to go to University of Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Johnson, have you I don't know how closely you follow HBCU sports. I'm big into following college athletics. I follow all college athletics, but do you remember the name Jay Hobson?
No.
Jay Hobson was the head football coach of Alcorn State, which is an HBCU in Mississippi, in southern Mississippi. It's about 4 hours of Hattiesburg. It was the HBCU that Steve McNair went to.
Okay.
So it was a powerhouse. It was a powerhouse along with Southern and Grambling during the 70s and 80s. So story short, Jay Hobson was hired to bring it back to prominence. Jay Hobson is the first Caucasian head coach in the history of historically black colleges. He coached there from 2012 to 2015. He came and turned Alcorn State into the powerhouse some of you may know it as today. It's the winningest HBCU in historically black college football right now. Now, the reason why I'm pointing out the hypocrisy is because Jay Hobson was at Alcorn for 3 years. He came almost out of nowhere. He was the defensive coordinator at Michigan. He came almost out of nowhere. Didn't have the kind of fanfare Deion had, but he came and he brought Alcorn State from obscurity to arguably one of the most dominant FCS programs today, even 10 years later. And he's left a template there that's helped them become really the pinnacle of what HBCU football is right now. They're one of the most dominant programs besides Jackson. What I'm getting to is this, Doctor. Why is it that people are ignoring the fact that Jay Hobson, he left Alcorn to go coach a program similar to Colorado, Southern Miss. He's actually from Hattiesburg. Southern Miss was a winless program, just like Colorado was. He left there, and the way he left, he basically left almost right after he won the HBCU national title, high and dry. But my question to you is this, Doctor. And like I said, Coach Hobson's a great man. I found myself very fond of his coaching style. Even 10 years later, Alcorn's benefiting for what he did there. Graduation rates soared. He helped the program become, like I said before, a dominant in football and academically. But if what Deion Sanders did is pretty much the same exact thing he did, how so much fanfare and so much criticism for Deion, but Coach Hobson is considered a hero amongst all HBCUs?
Well, I think Afro Disciple can answer that better than I could. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, because he's white, and we have an internal. I mean,
he came out shooting. Yeah,
yeah, because we have a very internal racist problem with ourselves, like where we devalue ourselves and give extra value to whiteness. It's the same thing we see with singing. And anything that we predominantly do, when we see a white person do it, they get invited to the fucking cookout for some reason. I don't like if they
dancing,
they do the
basketball,
mundane, yeah. You see, well, who was that white boy that did the dunk from the free throw line, and everybody was going fucking crazy, and he was fucking garbage, but because he could dunk from the free throw line, everyone gave him extra credit for that shit. It's the same situation here. We see white skin, and it's like, wow, we got to give extra credit. There's you get an extra credit score. Like you started at 780 while we started at 580.
It's 780.
That's real though.
Hopefully I don't ramble too much. It's just that I'm kind of new to this whole internet. I just discovered a lot of these channels. By the way, Mr. We Need to Talk, great channel.
Appreciate you, man.
What you doing, man?
Thank you, brother.
Let me ask you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead,
I
Doc.
just want to ask real quick question. What percentage of your campus is black male?
About 24%, 23.8.
And you're at which campus again?
Southern University, Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
And it's HBCU.
It's one of the more well-known HBCUs.
So 80% women. God.
75, 78. But that's most HBCUs.
Exactly.
Especially in, well, I'm in MBA. I'm also in, so there's probably a few more males in that one, but in most other fields, nah, it's mainly when I was in undergrad before I was taking my prereqs, it was like 7-3 black females to black males.
Yep.
Do you have an advantage by going? I'm just curious. Do you have an advantage by going there by being like, in a smaller demographic? Like, do they give you a lot of scholarship money? Because I don't see what the benefit for you is as a black man being.
The benefit, yeah. I mean, I was in ROTC in college, so the incentive for me was, you have a bunch of girls in my ROTC program who, I'm not trying at all sound sexist or at all trying to sound rude, but I was in pretty good shape, so I got a lot of merit for being in shape. The males benefited from being, not only in shape but can perform activities a little better than the females could. So we got scholarship money in that perspective. But I think another benefit is, I think one benefit of being a male in HBCU is it kind of just represents kind of what working amongst other black folks is. I get asked this question a lot, as a matter of fact, but I believe one benefit is, just knowing how it is working amongst other black folks in corporate America. It's kind of how it is. If that makes any sense.
Bro, I work in corporate America. I work for one of the biggest finance businesses in the country, and there's maybe out of 534 people that I got hired with, only 4 of them were black men, and I think the other maybe 6 or 7 were black women. You ain't gonna work with a lot of black people in corporate America. I hate to say it.
Well, I just asked the question about the student population because, I did a show recently looking at Howard, and it was basically the same breakdown, and they were bragging about how they had hired 10 black women deans and that no other university in the country could boast that. But my question is, if you got less than 20% black males at an HBCU that was built around a black male, what exactly is going on? Not only nationally with colleges in general, but at HBCUs. And I think the question raised about scholarships is incredibly important. If black institutions are not figuring out ways to get black men into their environments, what does it actually mean as to where we stand? So these are the kinds of questions I'm curious about, and I'm exploring. And I appreciate you being willing to kind of share that with me, Brian. Thank you for that, because it says a lot about where we are.
Yes, sir.
But I do got to go. So Alan, I really appreciate you inviting.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure being on this platform. Y'all are. It's an honor to be on so many successful black men. Hopefully, I can get to where a lot of y'all are.
Absolutely. Great luck to you, man. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Take care, man. All right.
Shout out to the good brother Wrench Turner. I don't get to see him that much, but it's good to see you, brother.
Hey, it's good to see you too, brother. I appreciate all the work that you put in and all of the way you put your neck out for us. So it goes without. I feel like it should be noticed a lot more, and we should be putting it on the wood a lot more. I think that is the clearest way to show support is with them pockets. So you may see me in a lot of spaces. I'm gonna do it in $10 increments, but by the end of the month, man, I look at my bank statement. It'd be like 1,500, 2,500.
Yes, sir.
But you brothers are worth it, because if we don't fund it, who will? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
shout out to you, brother.
The only way I've seen brothers, or I've seen people in the black male space really do well is when it's the sisters, man. And sisters come into space, brothers will reach deep in their pockets to support them. And the funniest part is they only saying what brothers have
it's frustrating, man.
You put a little,
I'm gonna be quiet.
You put a little British accent on it or whatever else.
Hey, I'm gonna be quiet. I ain't saying that. Rich, I ain't gonna say nothing.
You don't even need to know what
That's
she look
dope.
like. We just go pay
Nope.
into it. But you know, because and I'm not even talking about me. I'm looking at brothers like BGS or Green Gorilla, and these brothers are putting in monumental amounts of work. And I'm behind the scenes. I know how much work goes into this. And you know, I mean, even cats like Kevin were building things off of the ideas of these brothers that are still here, and yet, you know, brothers won't support. You know, so,
It's even to the point where you have brothers who literally go around, steal all the talking points, put a button up on, and then just, you know, regurgitate them week after week after week, day after day. I've gone on TikTok. And I've seen brothers like, because I've been around the space for a long time. I just recently started to cam up, but I've been around the space for a long time. Of course, moderating for Kevin, moderating for O'Shea before a lot of them really took off, working with MTR, a lot of the big YouTubers before they really blew up, and brothers that we were literally taking notes on live streams and comparing notes and stuff like that. But I've seen brothers take those ideas and just pop up in another space, and everybody's like, who the hell is this guy? You know what I mean? Like, who is he? And nobody can vouch for him, you know what I mean? So I get it, man. You know, it's me and Obi had a conversation a while back, and he said, what do you think? Do you think it's on the men or the women? What is the percentage to change this whole thing? And I said 90-10 on the men, because, you know, if it wasn't for men, Pearly wouldn't have blew up. If it wasn't for men, a lot of content creators wouldn't blow up, right?
Right.
I've gone on TikTok and literally seen women sitting in front of the camera, you know, eating hot Cheetos, and dudes just simping. just
OnlyFans.
So it's
OnlyFans.
You know,
that's why they're making millions over there.
Yeah, man, they're doing good, man. So it's on us. It's on the brothers, man. We gotta fund it.
Let me say this in support of my brother Alan. There are some women that know they thing. They know their business. They have done the work. I'm not saying any woman in the space is irrelevant. I'm not saying that. Definitely, you know, as in any endeavor, a small percentage of people that are doing the work. So, you know, I just want to support my brother real quick.
Yeah, straight up.
Oh,
man. Anyway, I appreciate y'all for coming.
Hey, salute to you, Dr. Johnson. I appreciate you pulling up, man. Thank you.
Right,
thank you.
I'll take it
sir. All right.
All right, Doc.
Peace. Yeah, man. I'm gonna give y'all brothers the last word, man, and then we'll wrap up, call it a night.
Afro Disciple, you can go ahead, brother.
Oh, thanks. Nah, you know, again, it's just basically comes back to I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing. You know, and it's always a pleasure and a treat to, like, you know, to see you talk with Dr. Johnson. And I hope we can have more academics like that join you in these kind of conversations, because I think, you know, we need to appeal to a wide demographic of different kinds of men and having these kind of conversations, because, you know what, like, as someone who grew up as introverted and nerdy, I like seeing what I consider my tribe, my people out there actually talking and representing the things I care about, and you know, speaking to, like, you know, the things that I internally deal with, because I'm not alone. I'm not a minority. I think there's more people like me within the community that need to hear these things, and you know, have an opportunity to talk. So again, thank you for doing the work, bro.
Thank you, man. I appreciate the support, brother. Wrench, what are your thoughts, brother?
Yeah, man. Shout out to you, bro.
Appreciate you, man.
I've been working and traveling, bro, so I hadn't had a chance to call in like I normally would, but really want to touch on what I talked about just a minute ago. For all of the brothers in the chat, the people that watch the restream, the brothers who have not subscribed to Dr. Deion Johnson, make sure you subscribe to him, BGS Help More. All of the brothers who really paved the way for a lot of content creators. And what I really want to really drive home is, if we appreciate these spaces and we don't want these spaces to go away, the situation that what happened with Deion is a prime example of what happens if we don't fund our own objectives. So if you appreciate it, we need to talk. If you appreciate Dr. Deion Johnson, you appreciate you know, all of the other and really not just the red pill content creators, but any in short, what I'm saying is fund your interests. There's no way around it. I've seen panels where conversations are happening between men and women, and the women in the chat and the women on the panels override it because brothers are not putting it on the wood. And as long as that is the case, then you're gonna start to have your most productive brothers leave the space and pop up doing something else. So we got to incentivize the thought leaders and the guys that are here putting it on the wood, doing the work.
Absolutely, brother. And you are a phenomenal example of that. So I want to shout you out, brother. Thank you so much. Anything I could do, man. I know I see your numbers moving up. So you know what I'm saying? We gotta get these wrench turner streams going. You know what I'm saying? So I can reciprocate. So just let me know how I could add value, brother.
Bro, you support our, especially having as big a platform as you do. And I'll be honest, I could do more to blow the channel up really quick, but but I'm in a pretty senior position now, so I'm careful about how I grow it. I want it to be organic. So if you notice, I stay away from popular topics because I've literally watched TLA's channel go from organic folks that were there in the beginning, and then all of the gossip folks come over, and it's just a shit slinging show. So that's why I haven't really been pushing growing it too much, is because I want it to be real organic, and try to keep a lot of the trolls and that type of stuff out. So, but I appreciate your support, bro. Sharing the memes, and I appreciate it, bro.
Absolutely, man. Salute to you, brother.
Absolutely, salute, bro. If you need anything, bro, by all means, let me know, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, bro.
Take care, brother. All right.
All right.
All right, y'all. I'm gonna read these super chats real quick, and then I'll play the rest of that comedy special to close us out. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Shout out to the brother Rich Turner. Shout out to Dr. Tiasan. Shout out to BGS. Shout out to Afro Disciple King, Brian. Shout out to you, brother. But yeah, let me go through these super chats. Let me be a good YouTuber. So Jersey McClendon. He says, keep up the great work, brother. I graduate from college tomorrow, and your work kept me motivated. Hashtag the Black Man Can. Thank you for what you do. Thank you, man. And congratulations. And best of luck to you, brother. Best of luck. Afro Disciple, he's in here. He says, this is why Save Yourself Black Man exists. It's sad, but no one else really cares unless we're already or brutalized. Yeah. Absolutely, man. And that's why I know some people might be thinking, man, it seems like Alan is becoming more sympathetic to the Save Yourself movement, where I used to be a hardliner. And for the people who, saw when that conversation started, as far as like when I inserted myself, I was never necessarily against the idea of leaving the country. I was against the idea of throwing shit while you leave. And I'm still against that, right? But if you watch any of my interviews where I bring it up, the concerns are valid. King Naimi, man, brother, you're gonna have to pull up and teach me how to say that properly, man. But I appreciate it. He says, cannot answer the question as I don't have all the facts. I know the gist of the story and the reports about things surrounding the decision, but I know there are many lessons we should learn about this that aren't paying attention to or paid attention to. Absolutely, man. And, at the end of the day, my biggest kind of point is, in as much as we owe a duty to our community, our community owes a duty to us. And at the very least, our community owes us reverence for the good things that we do as Black men. That a boy is not too much to ask. Let's support you as you continue to strive is not too much to ask, especially for the Black men actually doing the work. Mr. Smith, he says, here for the ministry. It's been a minute. Shout out to you, brother. I appreciate you. Anytime you pop up, I know it's gonna be love. Brian, appreciate it, man. Nothing to say, just straight love. Wrench on the wood for two of my favorite brothers. Appreciate you, brother. Appreciate the support, man. Kevin, he says, Coach Sanders been unappreciated. Michael B. Jordan dumped. Kevin Samuels and Kobe vilified after death. Black men and boys are watching. And I think that's the greater the greater part of this conversation, because it's not just about these brothers or brothers like me. It's about what's the next generation going to think? What's the messaging, right? All right. So Lewis, he says, you all are Manosphere. You just don't know it yet. You are one succubus away from being red pilled. I am not ATM with a phallus. You will not trample on my humanity. Yeah, man. And you know, the whole red pill thing, it's an ideology of just seeing the world as it is, seeing the truth. So in that sense, I'm red pill. As always, I've been critical of certain factions of the red pill. But you know, at the end of the day, the truth is the truth. So I'm gonna bid you guys a good night, but you know, I'm gonna play the rest of that stand-up special because I think it's still potent and it really hits or strikes to the core of what it is that we're discussing tonight. So good night, and I'm gonna stick around and enjoy the rest of Mr. Don DC Curry with you guys. So good night, and y'all have a great weekend.
At the inconvenience store, but I'm dedicated to patronizing them, even though it's hard. Go by the little store in the morning, they ain't open yet. They late. How you gonna be late and you live upstairs in the same damn building? Go by in the evening, on the way home from work, they done closed early and got the hell on. Go by lunchtime, the door locked. They got that little silly sign hanging on the door. We'll be back in 30 minutes. And they never tell you what time they left. It's the second minute or the 29th minute. Should I wait on your ass? And if the sign say we'll be back, that's more than one person. Why couldn't the sign say I'll be back? One of y'all could have stayed here to help my ass. Then when you get in the store, when you get in the store, they ain't got nothing you ask for. They're trying to sell you a bunch of substitutes. The substitutes don't make no kind of sense. You want sugar, they trying to sell you flour and grits. You want Pepsi, they showing you the Pabst Blue Ribbon. All them ignorant signs hanging on the wall, out of this, out of that, out of order, out of service, out of commission, out of change. We'll accept nothing larger than a $20 bill. You ain't got $19 worth of stuff on the shelf. Out of business, that's what you really ought to be out of. I'm out of my mind for going out of my way to support you. But I'm dedicated. I'm determined to patronizing my own struggling folk. I got enough money now to eat wherever I want. I can go to fancy restaurants and eat a bunch of stuff I can't even pronounce. Got to point to it on the menu to keep from embarrassing myself. I can go to fancy restaurants where the waitresses walk up to the table and respect you. Ask, what would you like, sir? But that ain't where I choose to go. I go to the little old broke down, struggling, family-owned soul food restaurant where they treat you. That's where I go, where they treat you like you ain't worth a damn. Like they really don't even want you in the damn place. Where the waitress just walk up to the table and stand there and look at you. You don't say nothing. You got about 30 seconds to order something, so she just walk off. You must not want a damn thing. Look what you brought yourself into. That's where I choose to go. I don't go being quiet. You don't get no ulcer trying to help nobody. I be raising hell when I hit the dope. You know things gonna be run backwards. Oxtails, $14 or $15 a plate. You can buy a whole damn ox for about $9.75. I be raising hell, asking questions like, how come it ain't no screen on the screen door? What about all these damn flies flying around in here? Should have brought me a fork, a knife, a spoon, and a fly swatter to kill some of these damn flies. Where the napkins at? Where the rest of the tablecloths at? What's all this sticky stuff on the damn table? How come my table won't be still? How come my chair wobbling? I got to balance myself up here. You get hard chicken. Why is the cook and the waitress putting the food on my plate with her hands? You got no utensils in this damn place? Why don't somebody sweep them cobwebs down off the wall? Where the rest of the ceiling tiles at? Where the light bulbs and the lampshades at? How come the ceiling fan ain't got no blades on it? Why don't you cut it off? It ain't cooling a damn thing. Just clicking, irritating my ass to death. What kind of bug is that over there? What kind of bug is that? What about the bug on the wall? Is he dead? Just sweep his dead ass down. He's alive while he's standing still looking at my table. Did he order something up in here? Was it for here or was that the to-go line on the wall? Is he at my table? Maybe I'm at his damn table. How come you got to cut through the kitchen to get to the bathroom? Then when you're going through the kitchen, you see the cook ain't got no net or nothing on her head. That's the dish rag wrapped around her sweaty neck. Her teeth sitting on the side of the pot. I know she bald-headed, but she got dandruff. It's falling over in the chicken's grease. Then the other day, once I got to the bathroom and finished doing what I had to do, then I looked up and realized wasn't no toilet paper or nothing in the damn bathroom. I left my pants down round my ankles. Got up, walked back into the kitchen, snatched that dish rag off her neck, wiped myself and threw it back at her. The next day, I brought myself right back to the same damn place, because I'm dedicated. I'm committed to patronizing my own struggling folk. I got the right attitude, and that's what you got to have. You can be smart and good looking, but if your attitude ain't right, you really ain't going far. You ever been in people can read your attitude. You ever been in a club or a restaurant, the waitress come to wait on you, be looking good and smart, well talking, articulate, but just got a funky disposition, bad spirit, bring you everything like you asked for it, but when you get it, you be afraid to eat it or drink it because you're acting so damn crazy. When the bill come, I be trying to find something wrong so I can just jump on it. But usually they're halfway smart and everything is right, but I still cringe when I got to tip them. But you can go again and get an old, ugly, broke down waitress, clothes hanging all off her, one eye, 3 or 4 eyebrows, no teeth but braces on her gums, got on a stocking on one foot and a sock on the other foot, but just as nice as she could possibly be. Not too smart now. Take a long time to get what you ordered, and then when she bring it, she be done brought the wrong stuff, but happy to take it back and try to get it right. When the bill comes, you got to scratch out a bunch of ignorant stuff she done added on the ticket. Girl Scout cookie fund for her daughter, building fund at her church, but I still tip her because she had the right attitude, and that's what you got to have. There was an election in Georgia about 4 or 5 years ago. It came down to a runoff. Came down to 2 candidates, Julian Bond or John Lewis. Julian Bond was clearly the most qualified, but his attitude wasn't right at the time. He was qualified, tall, light-skinned when that was in style. Wavy hat. Had a silk tie, silk shirt, $1,000 suits and shoes, but something about his attitude just wasn't quite right. Here come the other little old candidate, John Lewis. About 4 feet tall, big swole up, wrinkled up, ashy head. Ain't seen no lotion since the civil rights movement. 2 big chapped lips, look like a Valentine heart turned sideways and stuck on his face, but it had the right attitude. Old pinstripe suit, missing half of the stripes. One sleeve was short, one was long, run over wingtips and a crochet tie, but you just felt like he was on your side. And you couldn't understand what John Lewis was talking about, but you felt like he was on your side. John Lewis couldn't even pronounce the word campaign. He made a speech and was calling it champagne. Made a speech. John Lewis in his speech said, this champagne ain't about where you put your ears and asses in your sentences. This champagne ain't about being articulate. This champagne ain't about how you use your prepositional phrases. This champagne is about liberty and juices for all. That's what people need. Liberty and juices. Just like the Constitution of the United States says, liberty and juices for all. And until all people get their liberty and juices, This will not be a safe sorority in which to live. John Lewis won by a landslide because he had the right attitude. That's what you got to have. I got it. That's why I love the civil rights days. Back then, we had the right attitude. We fell for the oldest trick in the book, divide and conquer. That's what happened. They created women's lib, diluted the civil rights movement in our own homes, and it bombed. That's what happened. Women's lib wasn't even a separate issue. They threw in the curveball. Should you have to wear a bra or not? That ain't nothing to have no damn march about. Them your damn titties. Don't want to wear one, don't wear one. I like to look at them. You're 45 or 50 and they're drooping a little bit, tuck them in your waistband and get the hell on. If you're 85 and they dragging on the sidewalk, shooting off sparks and shit, them your titties. The only issue was equal pay for equal work. That's common sense. Anybody that does the same job deserves the same money. That means if a white brother drives a truck and delivers 20 TVs to a destination, anybody else that does the same job deserves the same amount of money. Now, you don't have to succumb to the culture. That ain't the job. The job is to deliver the TVs. So if a Chinese man drives a truck, he gonna do it his way. The Chinese ain't that tall, can't see over the dashboard that good, probably run over a couple of pedestrians on his way to the warehouse. But if he delivers the TVs, you owe him the same amount of money. If a woman drives a truck, sure she gonna do it her way. She's gonna run some people off the highway in the morning because she be getting dressed while she driving, putting on lipstick and taking curlers out of hair and stuff. And then when she get to the warehouse, she gonna park the truck all up on the curb and stuff. But if she delivers the TVs, you owe her the same amount of money. If a brother drives a truck, sure he gonna do it his way. Gonna be some chicken grease on the steering wheel when he get there. Gonna be some Afro sheen on the back window where he took a nap. May have some watermelon seeds on the dashboard, some naked chicken bones on the floorboard, and some hot sauce bottles on the seat. He gonna be late as hell. And when he get there, he ain't gonna have all the TVs. When you finish deducting for all the stuff that's missing, you owe him the rest of the same amount of money. I love the civil rights days. Back then, we had it different. We had it going on. We had it different. And we were protesting back then about the right thing. Back then, we were protesting about things that really mattered. And now, a lot of times, I think we get caught up with a whole bunch of stuff that don't matter. I turned TV on the other day. I saw some folk in Chicago, black folk just raising hell about somebody cutting down some trees. Some trees? Who give a damn about no damn trees? Every time I look at a tree, I think about one of us getting hung or lynched. I wish they cut down every damn tree in the United States. I'd like to stand on my front porch in Georgia and wave to some folk in New York or Mississippi somewhere. There's flat land everywhere. I don't care nothing about no damn trees. Then I saw some folk just raising hell talking about animal rights. Animal rights? We ain't got all our rights yet. Ain't got time. Ain't got time. How you got time? Talking about some mules in the circus jumping off a diving board into a little pool of water, huh? We plowed behind them damn mules for 700 or 800 years. Sun up to sundown, mules just dragging us through the field. Did the mules ever say anything on our behalf? The mules were laughing at our ass. Let's laugh at the mules a while. Let them jump. I hope they missed the damn pool. I'm telling them about them mules. And I didn't like that movie they made either. Free Willy. A damn fish. Free my Uncle Willie. His ass been locked up for 5 years. Uncle Willie said he didn't do nothing. I'm down crazy.